things to order. Welcome one, welcome all. What a tremendous opportunity we have as we go forward in a new year with new faces on council. What an opportunity we have to move forward. And we look forward to meaningful engagement with each other. We look forward to meaningful engagement with our public. And we look forward to good things going forward. Okay, with that being said, Mr. Manager, I think we have a briefing.
Yes, we have several briefings. We have five.
That's not a way to make an issue.
Aaron, did you plan that?
I did not.
Hey, call me at exactly 3:01. Yeah.
Oh, I want you to know I'm the good, so does that make you the bad?
We start off with jocularity. You gotta love
Councilman
it.
Excuse me, Mr.
Rouse, welcome.
Aaron, is it your birthday today?
It is.
That's what Facebook said, so
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
A momentous occasion. Okay.
Okay, so,
let's roll.
Mayor, members of council, we have five presentations, actually four presentations and a discussion item. We're going to begin today with our Deputy City Manager, Ron Williams, providing you an update and briefing on the terms of the Dome/Wave project. And I would defer to your council liaison, Louis Jones, to open a comment about what got us here and then turn it over to Ron.
Well, thank you, Mr. Manager. We have worked diligently, both the staff and the liaisons on this particular project. We've had numerous meetings to bring ourselves to the point that we are at today, and that is to present to you a proposed term sheet on the project. I think all of us who have been involved on the city side, and I believe on the developer side, are in agreement on the terms, as I understand. And so I look forward to hearing your comments and any suggestions that you might have. But this is the result of a lot of hard work on the part of both the developers as well as the city manager and the liaisons. And in my view, I think we've come to a very good, strong understanding. And with that, I'll have you take charge.
Mayor, members of council, good afternoon. Welcome to 2019. I'm going to give you some background about the project and the process for how we got to here today. I'm going to walk you through the actual term sheet as much as you want to go into detail, but I thought it'd be prudent, since it's not that long a document, to walk you through that and then talk about next steps. And we do have with us today our development partners, Mike Culpepper and John Gibson with Venture Realty. So as a reminder about where did we start, this work for the Dome site is embedded in the 2008 Resort Strategic Action Plan, which is now 10 years old. But the overarching goals, as adopted in 2008, this in particular meets the goals of creating great distinctive identities, to improve pedestrian connections between destinations at the oceanfront, to grow residential, to concentrate retail, and then of course that decades-long goal we've had to continue to focus on achieving a year-round resort. With that as background, and the fact that we had interest, particularly in the 2000s and even in this decade, to develop the site since when the Dome was torn down in 1994. We have been trying to achieve the right mix of a development for this site and achieving those goals. And so with the background that we had for other potential developments that did not come to fruition, and the fact that the city council had authorized conveyance of those parcels to the development authority, there was direction given to development authority in early 2017, especially since the market was ripe for this type of development, to go back out and seek a development design build operation team to try to achieve what we thought was the vision to meet for the oceanfront, but also to meet market demands. And so we were looking for a multi-block mixed-use development with commercial office, entertainment concepts, in particular because of a recommendation that we had when we built the Sandler Center and the fact that you no longer had the Dome or the Peppermint Beach Club or even the Boathouse over in Norfolk in the market, that we were missing acts that pass Hampton Roads altogether. And so a recommendation for a 3,500 person live entertainment performance venue for music, comedic acts, and so on and so forth. Unique or new to market retail, unique or new to market authentic restaurants, residential, again, achieving that goal of the Resort Strategic Action Plan, and then year-round programming to attract both locals and visitors alike. And so we put out a request for qualifications. We had 4 teams, all highly competitive with national interest from across the United States that we vetted with the liaisons from the Development Authority and the Council throughout the spring and early summer of 2017. And ultimately, by the end of 2017, we had the selection of the Venture Realty team and the vision that they had laid out to meet all of the components that we had in this request for qualifications. So to provide the disclosures of the principal leadership of this team, it is predominantly Venture Realty Group, but they have partners with WM Jordan and H2O Investments, the Costin Companies, Pharrell Williams, and Bashar Development Corporation. You will continue to see these disclosures as you take action over the next couple steps that we have for this development. And then there's service providers that they have disclosed at this time with the architects Oppenheim and Hamberry, WM Jordan's contractor, WPL Kinley Horn Engineering, legal is in-house, and then there is a property owner partnership that we'll come back to later with Virginia Beach United Methodist Church. So part of the process that we established is that we wanted significant public engagement to vet the concepts that they had. And while predominantly it took place in January, a significant portion of this carried through the spring and even into the summer. But we had a significant workshop attendance, significant online surveys and written responses, and then either Mike or the city staff or combination of city staff and Mike had dozens, over 30 stakeholder meetings of both civic leagues and common interest groups such as business associations that we met and briefed. Through all of this, we then took that information and understood and validated the concepts that were out there. Originally, Venture had introduced this as their vision that we were so excited about, and they helped evolve the vision based on that public engagement and that input to what they now are dubbing the WAVE, which includes next to the Methodist Church, of course, commercial office tower with parking, the north block at the Dome site with restaurant and retail and apartments and embedded parking garage there. More apartments on the Treasures block, again with restaurants and retail here on this block. The surf park, which was the unique new idea that was introduced by Venture. And then, of course, that 3,500 person entertainment venue with the Dome itself as part of the WAVE project. And so then we commenced based on a resolution that was passed by the Development Authority for a cost sharing to make sure, cost sharing of feasibility studies to make sure, again, now that we have the public engagement and there was broad-based support for it, will this product with these 10 acres of development actually work? And so we validated the market demand for the entertainment venue at that size. The largest size of an entertainment venue in the market is Chrysler Hall at 2,000 before you jump to the TED at ODU at nearly 10,000 to 11,000 seats. And so we wanted to make sure we validated that and affirmed the recommendations, and we did that with Stone Planning. And then the retail feasibility, what type of retail? And that's where we started to bubble up, especially with the city's goal for entertainment and for year-round destination, that experiential retail, such as Crayola World or Legoland. National Geographic has been floated as a concept, that those are the type of uses that will complement this, that give us something to do on that rainy day in January. And then we had Lambert Advisory give us the overall economic impact analysis. And then Desmond Design Management helped us right-size the parking based on all of these uses and the development area that we have. The outcome of the economic impact analysis helped us understand the direct fiscal impact, which was validated, and it doesn't happen very often where the developer, the city, and even your economic advisor, consultant, all agreed on the tax generation out of this project. And so it's a healthy north of $8 million that are generated in the first year of operation based on their overall density and the types of uses in this project. And what does that mean for then how does that translate in, what does it mean for the city? Well, based on our distribution of taxes, it means almost $3 million to the tourism investment program, almost $3 million to the general fund, around $2 million for schools, and then $500,000 or so for our other funds. And then when you look on a nominal basis, the 20-year impact of just general fund, more than $65 million or $44 million for schools, as long as we're keeping those dedications. Significant generation, a win-win for the city. The overall economic impact during construction, about 3,500 jobs, and once operating and stabilized, about 2,000 jobs, most of which are on-site and some are indirect that are from services or surrounding. And then almost $150 million worth of total operating impact. And this is based on the M-Plan model that is commonly used for economic analysis, impact analysis across the United States. And so when we looked at and as we worked through all of 2018 and aligning with our investment partnership policy that you adopted several years ago, and what is it for this type of product that we thought was the alignment of our financial recommendations and the principles and the recommendations that you have in the term sheet today. These are the principles that were met. Number one, that the project produces a net positive benefit to the city over 20 years, and it's demonstrated in that tax generation, you see that type of impact. Number two, that the project produces enough revenues to cover expenses. And through the early years, we start to achieve that, where on an annual basis, year over year, you see that there are revenues that are covering the debt service that we have for our capital investment, and then also for the incentives that we'll discuss in a minute. We had a policy recommendation that we keep the distribution of taxes as it stands today, and that's why we highlight the benefit to the general fund and schools. And then that all the expenses, the capital investment and the incentives be paid for through the Tourism Investment Program Fund. And that we would participate in a Tier 2 TDFP, which I'll come back and get into more detail about that. And then the benefit for the developer. And in order for them to finance a project, they advised us, and this was a goal for us to achieve in this term sheet that you have before you, that they get a 10% return on cost so that they can finance the project. Sidebar for a minute about the Tourism Investment Program Fund, just as a reminder, especially with a couple of new council members. This was first established, the first iteration of this is a Tourism Growth and Investment Fund in 92, 93. And then a complementary fund was established in 01 and 02 with the major projects fund, which helped dedicate revenues for the convention center, the Sandless Center, and parking for the aquarium. And then they were merged in the 2011-12 to make our current iteration of the Tourism Investment Program. And so what it provides is when you need new product, when you need to make sure that you try to achieve that goal of being a year-round resort, but also that you get repeat visitors and grow your visitors, it gives you the ability to invest in product that helps get those visitors here without competing for general fund monies on an annual basis or the school monies. And so we dedicate a portion of our hotel tax, restaurant meals tax, 100% of the amusement tax, and then a portion of cigarette tax that gives us on an annual basis, which has grown right now to about $40 million a year in our TIP fund. So recap about the process, we've gone through the selection with the approval of preferred developer. We did our studies, we had significant public engagement. We've received those reports, which overall have high positive recommendations for the feasibility and the type of product that puts us on the map. And so now we're here in January with a term sheet before you, which I'll walk us through in a minute. And we have a goal of by June of this year that we believe we can bring the development agreement, which this framework and the term sheet would spell out much more detail. Ultimately, we think that we could be under construction in 2020, and that it takes about 3 years to do all 10 acres of the development. Certainly, we'll want to try to pull that forward if we can, and so we'll try to beat those goals, but this is a realistic time frame at this point. I have a lot of words on several slides here, but basically, it's a snapshot of the 5 pages which you also have before you. And so if you want to grab that, I'll walk you through it, and I can go into as much or little detail as you want, but I'll hit the highlights here. Basically, on page 1 of the term sheet is a background of the process that we've gone through for selection and the overview of a development agreement. Most notably, it gives a definition of what the term sheet is, which is an outline of the terms that we will then flesh out the framework in a development agreement, which will be probably 100 pages or so, right, Mr. City Attorney? And then that this is non-binding. So this is step 1. We will spend the next 3 months bringing back the document, if you pass this next week, that define these terms. And it forms the basis for that ultimate development agreement. On page 2 is the project description and some terms. Number 1 is that there will be a ground lease through the Development Authority for 60 years with the opportunity for 2 20-year extensions. That there will be a condominium regime established, which is common for a mixed use form of development. For example, in Town Center, the city owns the condominium units of the parking garages, and the airspace of the office is owned by the development partner. So we will use a similar methodology here. The mixed-use development will contain several buildings and uses, and that some adjacent parcels may be considered for the ultimate inclusion in the development, depending on what we're able to work out over the next couple months. And then identifies the key elements of the project: the entertainment venue that we've discussed, the parking facilities, the commercial facilities, which include the retail, the surf park, the commercial office use, residential facilities, and then streetscapes, which include the sidewalks, open spaces that are in the 19th Street, which will be closed, and the pedestrian area also on 18th Street, and potentially connecting bridges. Continued on page 2, the developer obligation. There's some call-outs here. Number 1, that the developer will construct all of the project elements, and so they are our design, build, operate partner, and so it's understood that they will construct it. We will mutually collaborate on the final product that will be refined. Of course, they need to comply with our small business enhancement program, which is a reminder, it was adopted in August of 2012, and that is that enhances subcontracting and subconsulting opportunities for SWAM businesses. And then that they will acknowledge the City Council's 10% minority subcontractor goal and work to identify minority subcontractors to the extent commercially reasonable. On page 3, this is where we start to get into a little bit of specificity about each element. Number 1, the parking garage on subparagraph A. And this first bullet you'll see repeated for each element. Our partner will design, develop, and construct the element, the parking facility, and we will pay them on a pay-as-you-go basis during construction. We'll pay the actual cost, and for the parking facility, we estimate currently at $30,000 a space, and we will finalize that during the pre-development period, which we'll come back to pre-development period in a minute. We will provide a 2% development fee, which is common for this type of arrangement. And then we will own, and it says authority, which is the city, Virginia Beach Development Authority, will then use our parking division to actually operate and collect the revenues from the operations of that. We will also enter in a mutual agreement parking license with the developer for certain uses and elements of the project. Page 3 continued, the entertainment venue, 3,500 person. Again, we will pay on pay-as-you-go basis. Our estimate is that, and our investment in this is not to exceed $30 million. Again, we'll have a 2% development fee. and that we need to work out the terms for the operation of the venue, much like we have for the Sandler Center, much like we did recently for the Sports Center. That Oakview Group was brought to the table by Venture, and we are very pleased with the opportunity with Oakview Group, and so we need to finalize the terms with them for the operation, and we will expect that a minimum of $5 million contribution will come from Oakview into the venue as well. Page 4, we highlight the streetscapes with an investment of not to exceed $7.5 million. We establish here the notion that we agree with a development partner for the establishment of a special service district like we have in Town Center to ensure that the streetscapes, programming, and maintenance and cleanliness of the district are of the highest quality. We will negotiate and agree with our partner on a real estate rate that should be over and above the current real estate rate there that would then be assessed, and that ultimately we would ask for your approval in the future for that when we do the development agreement. And then that it identifies that the operator, the developer, has the right for servicing the areas for concessions and umbrellas, cabana services, understanding that that you have a surf park there, food and beverage service, and then because there is some use of right-of-way in 18th and 19th Street, of course, there might be some permits or licenses that we need to grant for some of the areas in there. Page 4, continued, so paragraph D is where we get into the incentive, and I have a couple other slides that'll come back to this, but we'll highlight it. I will demonstrate some of what this actually means in dollars, but we agreed that we will assist the developer in qualifying for Tier 2 Tourism Development Financing Program financing, and that we have a call out here, although our intention is that all of that incentive would be paid for by the TIP. But we have a call out here about the 0.5% because the state authorizes 1.5% from each partner, and I'm going to show that to you on a slide. But we actually don't have a 1.5% local sales tax, and so we have a call out here. But the intention is that all incentive and performance grant are paid from the TIP. We will provide an additional performance grant, as we call it, and when an amount added to the TDFP is sufficient for a total of incentive of up to $5 million per year, which would be generated by the project, by the operations of the uses of what Venture develops. And an understanding right now is a call out that basically the integrated vision, that the images that you see at right now estimated at least for what the beyond financing and the city's investment would be $227.5 million. And that these will be paid solely out of the revenues generated of the elements of project. So the performance grant, as we've structured it, is those monies that would otherwise go to the TIP. So it's earmarking amusement taxes and meals taxes that would otherwise flow through the
Excuse me,
TIP.
Ron, we have a question from
Yes.
Shannon?
Can you explain again 3I where you don't have a, what'd you say? There's a 0.5%, but you don't have a 1.5 for, explain.
We don't have a directly correlating 1.5% here. We have a 1% sales tax that would otherwise come here that normally you would capture the state sales tax that you can capture as part of that.
So Ms. Kane, we pay 6%. 1% comes back to the city.
Right.
Tier 2 TDFP is 1.5% per customer, so we will only receive our 1% back. We have to make up the other 0.5%, and that's what he's trying to explain as a call out, meaning the TIP has to pick up that, but the TIP's also going to pay the 1%
I got
that
you.
we're
Yeah.
going to. They're paying 100% of all the costs. Tourism investment program is going to pay 100% of all the costs on this project.
So are
Yeah,
we,
we-
are we collecting that at the point of sale in addition to that 6%, or are we,
No,
It's embedded in that.
okay,
It's so the call out is more so for the state when we go for the application to see that we are how we're participating with the additional 0.5%.
okay.
Because again, we don't have a 1.5% local sales tax that comes to us, and we wanted to call that out, that we have another way of covering the 0.5%. But ultimately what we'll do, it'll be more accounting down the hall in finance that will deal with the how, first it's remitted, and then how do we actually probably reimburse from the TIP fund to the general fund, and then ultimately back to the authority how the grant's provided. So we've got some mechanics to work through on that, but that's how it will flow.
Yeah, Ms. Henley?
Sorry, I'm still trying to get a voice back. So if it were tier one, it would be the straight 1%, 1%, 1%.
Yes, ma'am.
But this being tier two, it's 1.5, 1.5, 1.5.
That's right.
So the other 0.5% of the city's 1.5% would come from the other components of the tip, is what you're saying.
Straight out tip, yes, ma'am. And what we intend to do on top of that, though, is reimburse the 1% from the tip as well.
But it's not necessarily, or is it of the tip money generated by this project?
Correct.
So it's not tip money that's coming from any other
That's right.
sources?
Yes, ma'am.
It would be from this project.
But Ms. Henley, you need to understand that because all the costs, the debt service for the 95.5 that you're going to see in a few minutes, as well as the investment incentive that we're providing them, all that funding is going to come from the tip. So the tip is only getting a distribution according to our revenue distribution plan of a certain amount, which you saw was about 2.8 million. The first year expenses are going to be 11+ million. So the tip's picking up through their reserve and from other revenue sources that the tip receives from the tourism industry. They're picking it up. And our financial analysis across the 20-year window that debt service comes from the tip says the tip can provide ample coverage for all those costs.
But in this paragraph, it's only the monies generated by the project.
But for the total project, we're not making that assertion.
Correct.
It's all coming from this project.
For debt service, right?
It's
Yes,
all
ma'am.
here.
Thank you.
And so we do state that here. So otherwise payable by the tip fund. And then the performance grant payable in arrears. Now, we also, in our joint analysis and working with our development partner, saw that the pro forma looks good. It looks like there will be stabilization early. However, there may be, you never know what the market's going to do. And so what we've agreed to is that during the first 3 years, while they're achieving full stabilization, in order to maintain that goal of the 10% return on cost, is that we provide some additional gap coverage to achieve that 10% return on cost that would then be credited back at the end of the 20 years. And so they may get more than's actually generated from the tip revenues on site during these early years in order to achieve that 10% return on cost. But then it would be deducted from the grant that they would receive on the back end of the project if they have to use this.
May I just clarify? All right, the performance grant can only begin once it's in operation.
Yes, ma'am.
So where's the money coming from between now and 2023? Other portions of the tip?
This would be based on the project as it starts. So once it's operational, then it is generating revenue. And it would come from the tip, but also as a barometer, what we're using is the value of the real estate tax as a barometer for additional monies if the tip generated revenues are not producing.
So
It's only if it's operational.
So in simpler terms, the stabilization period is post-construction. So they will utilize a combination of construction debt and our contribution to construction to offset their having to cover a construction loan for our portion. And then once they go substantially complete, for lack of a better term, but something that most of us understand on all those sections that Ron said, then the stabilization period will commence. And we're doing this because we want to provide them the ability to walk in with the greatest risk reduction we can give our developer as he negotiates converting his construction loan to long-term debt for a longer period of time. And by guaranteeing that $5 million, it takes the conversation off the table because, as Ron said, we think they'll be fully stabilized. They'll be earning this of their own performance. and it should not be a burden on the remainder of the tip fund to pick up any delta. They should probably be in a good way. But it assures them it lessens their risk when they're sitting there across from the banks trying to finance $227 million of construction loan, or whatever amount their equity offsets.
The final portion in subparagraph F on page 4 basically authorized finalizing the transfer of title that was authorized in previous ordinances of the property. The deed needs to be recorded. And then additionally, that some reclassification of the streets that will now be intended use for pedestrian use on 18th and 19th Street will be a part of that action. So next steps is called out in the term sheet. One of those is happening today. And then we have public comment for both the Development Authority and the Council on the 15th. And then we spell out a new approach that we will have in the development agreement called a pre-development period. And the pre-development period will enable us, if we achieve getting a development agreement and you authorize it, it will give us a portion of time during the early part once we're underway, of design, to refine the design and to agree to a construction, overall development and construction budget. And then it'll need to be competitively put out for competitive costing for the construction elements of the project. And so it gives us the ability to understand what's going on in the market, and that we've got the right product, and that we can afford the product that we want. So we have a great vision with the design we have now, and we actually need to go into some refinement. And so the pre-development phases typically will probably get to 30% design, and then say, yes, this is the project, this is what we can do, and that gives that ability to do that. So as a reminder, a couple things just to come back to. So what we just laid out with the elements of the project, our overall capital investment is estimated right now about $95.5 million. And then the project can achieve an incentive with a Tier 2 TDFP and the performance grant of up to $5 million if it's generated there on an annual basis. Reminder about the Tourism Development Financing Program. This is a state program that we jointly apply with the development partner. And Tier 1, what it does is enable a construction developer to cover the 30% gap of their financing that they would do for the project. Tier 2 is a 20% gap. Tier 1 is 1% per partner, 1% of the state contributing, 1% of the development partner, 1% of the locality. And Tier 2, this is really often called regional TDFP. It is a north of $100 million project, and each partner puts in 1.5%. The breakdown, so how do the numbers right now, based on the pro forma that we have, that estimated $5 million, just almost 3.2 million is expected for the TDFP portion, of which in round figures is about $1 million from each partner in those in the early years. And then the performance grant, again, 100% of the emissions taxes generated by the elements that Venture, our partner, will actually have as their condominium units. This does exclude the entertainment venue because we will own that element. And then 20% of the meals, which is about the portion that would be otherwise dedicated, both of those for the TIP fund. Any questions on the incentive before I move on? Next steps. We do have a few outstanding issues that we will work through as we work on the development agreement. One of the office tower that I mentioned is actually on a parcel owned by the United Methodist Church. And so we still need to work through the terms for that. As I mentioned, we need to work through the terms with Oakview Group for the operation of the entertainment venue. And then Norfolk Southern owns the fee for some of 18th Street, and actually a parcel that Dominion Power uses for their Atlantic substation. And so we would like to eventually be able to acquire that substation parcel, but also we do have an issue we need to work through with Norfolk Southern on 18th Street. We do not see that that's insurmountable, particularly on 18th Street. The substation is an older generation of substation for Virginia Power. So we've been in conversations for more than a year and a half about how do they start to transition off of that in future years, especially when their lease will eventually expire. So those are some outstanding issues that we believe we can work through over the next few months. And again, the next steps, with your consensus and direction this evening, we would recommend that we schedule this for a vote for next week on your formal agenda, and we do have it scheduled for the Development Authority's consideration as well. And then pending that approval, we would then start negotiation of the development agreement. And Mayor, I do have Mike and John here that perhaps they might like to say a word.
That would be fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ron. We appreciate it. Again, I'm Mike Culpepper with Venture Realty Group, along with John Gibson. It's been a great privilege over the last 2 years to work on this project and get it to where we are here today. We have conducted an unprecedented campaign of public engagement that I hope is respected by this body and is acknowledged as a way to really move forward with the public and work with you, staff, and our friends and neighbors here in the city of Virginia Beach to ensure that this project reflects all of us. This is a project that means a great deal to all of us personally. We are all locals. We all have a very personal connection with the original dome, the dome site, and we are personally indebted to you to have the opportunity to see this project come to its fruition and hopefully be something that we'll all be proud of, something that will be iconic, something that will be transformational for the ocean front, and something that we'll look back on in many years and say, man, I'm glad we did that. So with that, I just want to say thank you again. Please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to holler at us. We are always available. And we ask that you consider voting and supporting this non-binding term sheet next week.
Okay, any questions or, conversation, please?
Just some
Yep, Barbara.
conversation that has sort of been rippling around in the community, as people are asking questions. Why the Development Authority participation? I mean, I know, but maybe you might want to clarify.
The participation now is that it was authorized for the property to be transferred a number of years ago in 2 actions in 2011 with the Dome site parcel, in 2013 with the Treasurer's block parcel, and the Development Authority both also passed resolutions to accept your action at council. Development Authority is, it gives you the ability and as our partner for doing this type of development. That is why they are created, is to do these type, and particularly for the leasing of the property. City attorney might have some perspective on that, but the lease parameters allow you to partner with the risk that would have to be assumed to pull off a development like this. The parameters established for what the Development Authority can actually lease, the term that they could lease, actually are beneficial for achieving this type of development. And that's how we've done Town Center.
To follow on to Mr. Williams' comments, as you all know, the longest that the city can lease a parcel of its property is 40 years. And so here we're talking about a base lease of 60 with 2 extensions. So the Development Authority has to be involved with you in order to do that. Also, the Development Authority has to be involved in connection with the mechanism for the incentive grants as well. So the Development Authority is necessarily a factor, and this council recognized that back in 11 and 13 when it voted to transfer the property to the authority, and when it directed the authority to issue the RFQ, which was the beginning of this current iteration of this process.
The lease is for 60 years, but these performance grants, it's a 20-year.
Yes, ma'am.
All of this financial stuff is a 20-year agreement, and I think that's an important I mean, when people hear 60 years and they think in terms of all of this, we're talking 20 years as far as the financial part of it at this point.
The proposed performance incentive is 20 years, yes, ma'am.
And I might say you're hitting the nail on the head. The word performance is critically important to understanding. They've got to earn it to take it home. And by agreeing to this performance incentive, they will work diligently to keep the product state-of-the-art, presentable, and meeting the standards that we're setting for this transformational.
Not that I'm going to be here worrying about it necessarily at this table, but how are we going to assure that this property is going to be maintained in the 20 to 60-year timeframe? I guess we're going to be owning the parking garage and the entertainment venue, so that's on the city. But the rest of this, we're assured that it's going to be properly maintained and it won't deteriorate and so forth in that timeframe?
Well, they're going to have, a huge equity stake, and they're going to put $227 million into it, and their company's good name, and their probably every penny that they got in the bank's going into it. So long-term, we believe that it's in their own best interest to make a profit and take care of that. Plus, I think that we have some pretty strong standards down there for maintaining our streets and our streetscapes.
The city still owns the property.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, we do.
And also, the expectations that would be established in our condominium declarations, the partnership of all of the 7 to 8 condominium owners, of which we will be a couple of those. We'll have entertainment venue, which will be a condominium unit, parking garages, streetscapes. Those standards are established and expectations of that agreement.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Yeah, if I can make a statement. No, Sabrina?
I have just a quick question, maybe an observation too. On page 2, when it says down here, it also says number 2, developer obligations. I was glad to see the information listed here about keeping in line and acknowledging the 10% for minority subcontractors for that goal. Just wondering, in light of the disparity study that came up, mentioning that goal is supposed to be a little bit more, is that going to increase as, the council increases that goal as well, or will stay the same?
Let me grab
yeah.
that. Ms. Wooten, I can tell you that we will, upon final receipt of the report, we have that draft report in from the consultant. We'll bring an ordinance forward to probably change that goal from 10 to about 12.3, 12.4%, somewhere in there, which is what gives us the above 80% utilization rate, which gives you the passing grade on the disparity study. So we'll make an amendment. This is non-binding. This is where we were during the terms that were being generated. We'll codify that as a goal with you, and then we'll incorporate those new standards in the development agreement, which will be a binding agreement.
Okay, it was good to see that in there. Thank you.
Mr. Wood?
Yeah, I wanted to commend the development team for the public outreach that y'all did, because frankly, that's what really helps sell a lot of these projects when they tend to be otherwise controversial. The fact that you had multiple meetings and everybody that I've talked to who's had any kind of issue or concern about it typically has gone to another one of your meetings, or a meeting where you're speaking or something like that, and it's been very helpful, and I appreciate the way y'all did that.
Okay. Mr. Nygaard, we welcome you.
Thank you.
And I understand that you are the district guy where this might be going. I was just wondering if you'd like, no, you missed the briefing, but I'm sure you'll get caught up. But would you like to make some comments?
Oh, no, I just look forward to participating with the rest of my council members here and getting to work. This is an important development. I don't know that I didn't get a chance to really comment, but I think that we need to make sure that this development is used to create jobs that we need, that are local jobs. So I'm in favor so far of what I've heard, and when we get to the fine tuning of the development agreement, I'd like to have some input, so.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, if I could just make a parting comment. For decades, the Dome site property has sat producing basically nothing. It was a parking spot. And we have an opportunity here, and I ask everybody to have an open mind on this. Remember, this is, the beginning. This is a non-binding term sheet. This is the opportunity for the developer and staff and the public to get together to try to come to a consensus. It's obvious that this valuable piece of property should have a magnificent project on it, due to the potential. And I commend our staff, and I commend the developer for a project of this magnitude. Negotiations are tough, they're deliberate, but if they produce fruit, and I think Mr. Wood hit on it, I mean, the civic engagement on this was second to none. There was many people included. And there are going to be many people out there, maybe skeptical about, some of the processes. Well, let's take the time to explain to people the tangible benefit of this. And I think perhaps if we look a little bit forward and play chess, not checkers, and say that the other benefits that would come as a result of this project to the adjacent neighborhood, to the Vibe District, to the potential of fixing up 17th Street. And having been a district council person for 14 years, I would like the people in Centerville and Kempsville and Rose Hall and Bayside and everybody to have a destination at their beach that they would be proud and come back to and participate as their beach also. And this is also going to help adjacent restaurants, hotels, and everything, and combined with the synergy of the sports center. This could be really a true destination that would produce those tangible benefits that we need. And what's good about this is that, the funding essentially comes from fund, money, it comes from tip money. And I think that's an important concept that we have to realize, and hopefully maybe a template for things going forward. But this also sends a message that, Virginia Beach is open and we're willing to do business with projects of this complexity. And let's not mince words. This is a complex project that's going to take continued public engagement and education and negotiations as we go forward. But once again, this is an opportunity that I think is worth taking and moving in the right direction. We will not forget the public and their input and concerns as we go forward. But I think, if we put the great minds together and, have a common objective, and once again, this is going to help create money. This is going to put money, well-needed money, into the general fund and to schools. And as we face the challenges that we do as a council with stormwater, public safety, school modernization and everything, we have to come up with these new revenue sources. And this is just a beginning of what we hope is, robust economic development that is going to take the burden off the residential taxpayer and place it in the business community. And I think we're going to have a win-win situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Mike, John, appreciate it. So, members of council, briefing number 2. We have the director of the aquarium, and she's also the CEO of the foundation and the administrator of the historic houses. But today, she comes before us to provide her annual Virginia Aquarium economic impact and her annual report. And she probably has some introductions to make. So with that, Cynthia.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, thank you for this opportunity today to share our amazing story with you. It's a journey that we're going to begin together with a new council and a new year. And I'm really excited that I was able to follow Mr. Williams's presentation because the Virginia Aquarium is the most visited attraction in Virginia Beach. And we're really excited because growing the economy is paramount to the aquarium as well as to this community. So I'm really glad that I followed that presentation. So I'm joined today by my amazing dedicated Aquarium Foundation board officers. These make up 42 members of our community that are a member of our foundation. I'm also joined by my amazing staff, And Walt Disney once said, imagine the impossible and then go do it. And that's what my staff does each and every day, and I'm really proud to represent them today. So our mission is to inspire the conservation of the marine environment. And today I'm going to share 3 things with you. First, we're going to go through my annual report, and we're going to talk about my mission and how that impacts the community. Second, I'm going to introduce Sage Consulting Group, who's going to talk about the economic impact that the Virginia Aquarium has on the City of Virginia Beach, the Hampton Roads region, and the Commonwealth of Virginia. And finally, I thought I would flip it around and quiz each of you at the very end of my presentation on facts about the aquarium. So I'm really excited about that last part, so stay tuned. So to put it simply, who are we and what do we do? So we're approximately 200 city employees with 1,700 dedicated volunteers that work with us each and every day. The city, as you know, owns and operates our buildings and our infrastructure, and our amazing foundation supports our exhibits and our animals and our programs. So just so it's simply put, our foundation supports the City of Virginia Beach. So last year was a year of transformation for us. In front of you is our annual report. And as you may know, I like to be different with annual reports. And so inserted in the cover of your annual report is something that 2 years ago, we joined 21 other aquariums across the globe, and we committed to be single-use plastic-free by the year 2020 in our facility. So I hope that you'll take our annual report. I hope that you'll read it. But more importantly, I hope that you'll take the metal straw and you'll skip using a single-use plastic. So last year was a year of transformation, so let's talk a little bit about that. So we had mermaids. We also had a new program which we were able to invite families to come in for a sensory inclusive environment where we called it Special Needs Under the Sea. We did our amazing Sensible Seafood Fest where we had local and regional chefs come share sustainable seafood practices with the community in a fun, tasty way. We also had a new event. We did an adult overnight. So imagine coming to the aquarium and then getting to spend the night as an adult. It sold out immediately, and we're really excited because we immediately booked another one. And then for the 3rd year in a row, our Valentine's Day event has sold out. So imagine a romantic evening in front of your favorite aquarium. Now, right before I got here, I checked. There are 12 seats left for this year's Valentine's Day event, so act quickly because it's pretty spectacular. The last year was a year of growth, and of course, in order for us to transform and evolve, we have to grow, and this required thoughtful preparation. For us, that was a new strategic plan. And we started with a situational analysis coupled with information gathering through many workshops with stakeholders, our leaders, and our staff. And then we built a strategic plan that encompassed all aspects of the aquarium's business. We came up with 5 goals. Of course, our challenge is going to be to create strategies and actions to implement those goals. Some things like major projects. And during this last year, we opened and updated our Chesapeake Bay Aquarium. Our cafe and snack stand had a complete redesign and renovation. Our Harbor Seal exhibit that's in front of the building had a complete renovation. And our restrooms received some modernization. So let me point out that these 4 projects for the City of Virginia Beach, you paid $1.7 million. But our foundation contributed almost $1 million for these 4 projects, just to show you that partnership. Of course, last year was a year of inspiration. And of course, our team renewed our focus on our guests, and we developed a better on-site guest experience. We added several staff on the floor as well as volunteers so that we can answer questions when guests come through. We also laid carpet inlays so people could actually find their way through the aquarium, and we did some better signage throughout the aquarium. Of course, our TripAdvisor and our revenues reflect that these strategies are working. And if you want to know about our TripAdvisor reviews, Vice Mayor Wood is usually a good person to ask because he knows how seriously we take those. So when he comes back in, we'll quiz him.
We're talking about you, James.
We're talking about your TripAdvisor reviews,
Yes,
Vice
ma'am.
Mayor.
I heard that.
So what could be more inspiring than sharks? And our very own Dr. Allie McNaughton joined OSearch, where they caught, they tagged, and they released sharks in order to study those. And we were really excited to partner with OSearch. We also continue to partner with the Center for Conservation Biology, and we monitor osprey nests in the Lynn Haven River. During these trips, we actually map and monitor the nests as well as band juvenile osprey throughout our trips. This work provides a snapshot of the overall health of osprey in our Lynn Haven area. And for those of you that didn't know, we have the largest concentration of osprey in the world, right here in Virginia Beach. All right, Councilman Roust, you're going to be excited about this next item. We worked alongside researchers on a field project with Virginia Tech and the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fishery on this little fish known as a candy darter. And this unique program allowed us a chance to focus on the state endangered species, and it provides us the bycatch that we use on our freshwater exhibits. Of course, fiscal year 18 was a year of animals. Without a doubt, our animals are why we exist. And we found viral fame with this little video that you're seeing here of an octopus that was hatched in February of last year. So our resident octopus laid some eggs. She took great care of those. When they dropped to the bottom, our aquarists were actually able to retrieve those eggs, and we actually captured them hatching on film. So, are you ready for this? This video was viewed over 4 million times on our social media sites. Worldwide, the video has been seen by more than 190 million people in 19 countries. It was shared by the Associated Press, CNN, Washington Post, ABC, NBC, and MSN.com. That little video right there. Something I've been wanting to do for years, we did this past May with our Komodo dragons. We gave them an enrichment opportunity. We provided them a restaurant quality goat. And we also live streamed this event on our social media channels, and we saw worldwide viewing. Now, in case you're wondering, this is Taman, and he ate the entire goat by himself.
Got his goat.
This was a year of conservation. And of course, if you think about conservation, you probably think about our Stranding Response Program. Of course, last year was a busy year for us. We responded to 98 marine mammals, 273 sea turtles, for a total of 371 marine animals to which we responded last year with our team. In August, we responded to this loggerhead sea turtle nest hatching event. And after the nest hatched, we were really excited because we went in to count the eggs, and to our surprise, there were a couple that were still hatching. So we immediately live streamed that, and we brought in viewers from around the world to watch those stragglers reach the ocean for their journey. Of course, last year was a year of campaigning, and we achieved another exciting milestone as we finalized our successful capital campaign for the Darden Marine Animal Care Center and the Owls Creek Marsh Pavilion. The Darden Marine Animal Conservation Center will be a new facility for that Stranding Response Program, as well as a place to quarantine those animals before we put them on exhibit. Site work has begun, and I want to thank Mr. Jones for spearheading the ribbon cutting that we did in November, and the building should be complete by 2020. The Marsh Pavilion boasts all new exhibits. We're going to have an outdoor watershed exhibit, a toddler play area, and a brand new veterinarian wing. And we hope that this building will open to the public in early 2021. Now, I want to take a moment and talk about how these two projects epitomize the relationship between the City of Virginia Beach and the Aquarium Foundation. So as of today, we are just shy a few dollars of $14 million raising from the private sector for these two projects. And that's what our Aquarium Foundation has done. So $14 million is a great segue to talk additionally about some of our numbers very quickly. So, very quickly, we hosted over 640,000 guests last year with 12,000 students. In terms of our operating revenue, we earned over $14 million. And you'll note that mainly 50% came from our tickets and 16% came from contributions and grants. You'll also note that we spent about $12.7 million, and as you can imagine, exhibits and programs are expensive. But if you're going to quickly do the math, and I won't test you, you're going to see that we had a net revenue of over $2 million last year. I want to point out that we used zero general fund money last year. We earned all of our money. Of course, the Aquarium Foundation retained any revenues that they earned through their programming, but we exceeded our appropriated earned revenues last year by over $1 million. So not only did we not use any general fund money, we gave you $1 million back from what we earned. So these numbers are really great, but what is the economic impact about the aquarium, and what does it have on our economy? Do we know that people are going to spend an extra night in a hotel, eat in restaurants, or shop because of us? Are these things that are going to impact you and when you're looking for money to impact revenues for schools and roads and other needed items? These were questions that we knew we needed to answer, and so we hired the SAGE Policy Group out of Maryland. Additionally, I'm pleased to say that Greg Grutendorf from the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission has joined us today, and Greg has also reviewed the data. So right now, please allow me to introduce Anirban Basu. He's the chairman and CEO of SAGE Policy Group. So let me just tell you a little bit about Anirban. So he's a study in contradictions. He actually has a sense of humor and a personality for an economist. He's been recognized by Maryland 2 times as the most influential people in Maryland. He serves as chairman of the Maryland Economic Development Commission. He teaches global strategy at Johns Hopkins University, and he serves as the chief economist function for a number of companies throughout the country. Anirban is going to take us quickly through our numbers for the economic impact, and I know you're going to be as impressed as we are with that tremendous impact. So Anirban?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, thank you very much for inviting me to the City of Virginia Beach to speak to elected officials, members of the executive branch and legislative branch. I want to go quickly through this economic impact analysis that we conducted on behalf of, well, this community, but of course also on behalf of the Virginia Aquarium. I'm going to walk through our methodology and findings regarding both economic and fiscal impacts. Our company, it's about 14 years old. We started in 2004, have clients in more than 40 states, 7 countries. I serve the chief economist function for a number of organizations, do a lot of construction economics, for instance, but other things. We have, among other things, written economic impact studies for many, including the National Aquarium in Baltimore. We studied many places that attract visitors. We have conducted the economic impact of the Baltimore Ravens, the Baltimore Orioles, and many others around the country. Do a lot of work in Orlando, Florida. And we use Implan as our economic modeling software. In fact, if you were to go to an Implan software training session, a SAGE Policy Group case study would be one of the case studies that you would read about. So we're quite familiar with the software. Nature of the endeavor, we're hired by the Virginia Aquarium to study the economic and fiscal contributions made by the aquarium to the city of Virginia Beach and to the entirety of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Methodological notes, we use Implan, economic modeling software. Why? Because it really takes the analysis out of the hands of the analyst. When one is hired, let's say by the Virginia Aquarium, the presumption might be among many that, well, you're going to try to produce results that satisfy the client, in this case, the aquarium. But Implan, what it does is we take inputs, and I'll talk about the inputs into the model in a moment. We throw it those inputs into the model, and then the model spits out the outputs. In some sense, we lose control of the analysis by design. The model itself incorporates economic multipliers that are specific to Virginia Beach and specific to the Commonwealth of Virginia. There's a lot of specificity in these models. And again, I'm going to go through these inputs in a moment. The inputs that we use came from Virginia Aquarium financial data, which are publicly available, as it turns out, and an intercept survey of aquarium visitors that I will also speak about. The survey. The survey was conducted by folks from Christopher Newport University, an intercept survey of people visiting the aquarium. The goal was to have a bit more than 300 respondents to get to 5% statistical significance. Our N, our number of respondents, 423. And as analysts of the data, we were really delighted to receive such robust primary data. Few questions that we asked during both peak and off-peak or peak and shoulder season periods. If the aquarium, was the aquarium your primary reason for visiting the area? How many days did you intend to stay in the area, and how much they intended to spend in the area? All sources of inputs into our model. Again, the N equal to 423. So here's the issue, or an issue. We call it the attribution problem. If somebody comes to Virginia Beach and happens to go to the aquarium, what fraction of their expenditures in the city of Virginia Beach should we attribute to the aquarium? Well, that's a function, of course, of do they come to the aquarium as their primary reason to be in Virginia Beach? If that's the case, we can attribute most or all of their expenditures to the fact of the aquarium. But for the aquarium, they would not be here. Alternatively, is their visit to the aquarium incidental to their general purpose of being here? Maybe they were more interested in being at the beaches or visiting somebody at one of the military installations or whatever it happens to be. And then we would attribute something less than 100% of that spending to the aquarium. And so in response to the question asked by the folks at Christopher Newport University, which, by the way, has a very robust social sciences department, majors in both and minors in both economics and some other related subjects. And so, but Virginia Aquarium, is it your primary reason for visiting Virginia Beach? Of that 423 respondents, 119 said, yeah, strongly agree. This is why we are here. That translates into 28% of respondents. I somewhat agree. It's one of the primary reasons for being in Virginia Beach, 98 respondents. Neither agree nor disagree. You know, it's one of the factors, but it's not the only reason. Some would disagree and then strongly disagree. And we basically use an algorithm, and that's sort of summarized to your right, with respect to how much of their local spending we would attribute to the presence of the aquarium. Again, if they strongly agree with that statement, that 28%, that 119 respondents says 100% of the expenditures in Virginia Beach we attribute to the aquarium. And so on and so forth. If they strongly disagree with the statement, no, I am visiting the aquarium. These are all people who are intercepted at the aquarium. They're at the aquarium. They're coming. But they're saying, that's not my primary reason. It's one of the things I'm doing, but it's not my primary reason for being here. We attributed 0% of their spending outside of the aquarium to the aquarium itself. Visitor spending from near and afar. So what I've done for you here, probably showing you too much data by half, but peak season and off-peak season, that's where you see these labels, peak season, off-peak season, and then the rows immediately below those relate to those two seasons. So during the peak season, the bulk of visitors are non-local. And by the way, with respect to the question of whether or not they would spend a night in a hotel or not, the assumption we used is that if they had to drive more than 3.5 hours to get to Virginia Beach, they'd probably spend at least one night in a hotel here. But you can see that during the peak season, 270,000 or 271,000 visitors, attributable visitor spending 88 million. Here's what's interesting. During the off-peak season, the number of visitors is actually greater. 344,000, 345,000 rounding up. During the off-peak, more people visit the aquarium during the shoulder season as opposed to the peak season. That is a source of economic diversification from a year-long perspective. Now, during the off-peak season, the bulk of visitors, or a greater share of visitors, I should say, are local relative to the peak season. It is still the case that in both Peak season, off-peak season, the majority of visitors are non-local, but the local share of visitors is greater during the off-peak season. Local residents, when they come to visit the aquarium, spend less on average. We presume that they don't spend in a hotel room, and they're not as dependent upon this community for food and other kinds of services. During the peak season, 88 million, as I say, in attributable visitor spending. During the off-peak season, 84 million. Diversification economically. Both seasons, 172 million spending here because of the aquarium. In other words, but for the aquarium, spending in Virginia Beach would be 172 million less than it is. Now, that's not the only source of effect. So when we model economic impact, it's all about expenditures. So one set of expenditures, of course, is the visitor, but another is the fact that the aquarium in and of itself is a significant operation. And that results in more expenditures in the community. The types of expenditures here, you'll see FY 2013 data in that first numeric column, FY 2018 in that second numeric column. It says 20.4 million in that second numeric column, but this includes, as it turns out, capital expenditures. It also includes things like depreciation. If you take those things out, you'll get a number eventually of 12.7 million, which is the number you heard just a moment ago. So that's ultimately what goes into the model, that 12.7 million, at least for fiscal year 2018. Of course, where there are expenditures, there are revenues. Let's talk about revenues. Here in this first numeric column, I'm showing you fiscal year 2013 revenues. Second numeric column, fiscal year 2018. You can see that revenues went from 11.7 million to 16.2 million over that 5-year period. That's a change approaching 39%. But what's more interesting is the sources of the delta, the sources of the change in revenues from fiscal year 13 to fiscal year 2018. So at the top, aquarium theater admissions revenue went up by roughly $1.4 million during that 5-year period. That's what you want to see as the representatives of this community, leverage. Yes, the city has been a source of support to this aquarium, no question about it. The question, is the aquarium operationally leveraging that support into greater impact over the course of time? Answer is yes, more people are coming. Photo concessions, you can see that third row there, photo concession, those revenues are up nearly 89% in 5 years. That's leverage. Facility rentals, up 76% in 3 years. Education programs, up 91% in 5 years. That's that dollar support that you provide being leveraged into greater economic impact, ultimately greater expenditures. So here are the computed economic impacts. So let's focus on the bottom half of this slide because that pertains to Virginia Beach, whereas the top half pertains to the balance of the Commonwealth. 3,261 jobs supported, directly and indirectly, because of the aquarium's presence here. Again, the big part of that is because $172 million in expenditures, visitor spending, comes to this area that would not otherwise transpire. Those 3,261 jobs are associated with nearly $80 million in annual employee compensation, total local contributions to business sales, the size of this local economy, $257 million. Now this models those visitor expenditures and that operational spending, but of course, the aquarium also engages in capital expenditures. We separately model the economic impact of those capital expenditures. So this is over the course of 5 years, fiscal years 2013 to fiscal year 2018, as it turns out, actually 6 years. The total contribution of capital expenditures during that 6-year period, $40.2 million. And you could divide that by 6 and add that on top of the $257 million to get total economic impact. It'd be a bit north of $260 million. I'll come back to this number in a moment. You may actually care as much or more about the fiscal impacts. Those are computed here. Again, let's focus on the top part of the slide in this case, Virginia Beach. When you look at property taxes, emission taxes, this city's share of state sales tax is the 2%, of which you're well aware. $7.6 million in annual fiscal impact. That's the contribution of the aquarium to this city. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the current ask of the city during the next upcoming fiscal year is $2.7 million. Assuming that the aquarium does not grow from its current level, therefore its fiscal impacts do not grow from $7.6 million, that still translates, even if that ask is delivered, That's $2.8 of fiscal impact for every dollar the city contributes. Very rarely in life, whether mammalian and or aquatic, does one put in $1 and get back nearly 3. That's exactly the case here. And yes, it is true that in some sense the aquarium recently, because of its success, has been generating surplus revenues, but of course a lot of that has to go toward capital spending and into reserves as well. Because there's always a fair amount of depreciation, and as it turns out, the aquarium is looking to redefine some of its exhibits right now. And so the capital requirements are going to be quite intense going forward, and that's what it takes to stay fresh and continue to attract visitors. By the way, the staff of the aquarium is phenomenal. I just took a tour of the aquarium, and these are people who care about the neck muscles of kimono dragons. These are the people who care about the romantic lives of dart frogs. And in fact, as I was walking around the aquarium, I saw 2 dart frogs in what I would call, in polite society, a compromising position. It was awkward for all of us. So, but the staff, this is important to the staff, these kinds of things, that these animals are well tended to and available to the public, your public. So, analytical highlights: City of Virginia Beach tax revenues increased by $12 for every 1 visitor. That's $7.6 million divided by 615,000 visitors at the gate. You heard a number before, 640,000. That included other forms of visitors. So when I use 615,000 in the report, if you see that, that's people who paid attendance. In FY 2018, the aquarium generated enough city tax revenue to conceptually pay the salary of nearly 180 additional teachers or firefighters and 185 additional police officers. Of course, I understand completely that some of the tax revenues that we're talking about, some of the categories, are earmarked for other purposes. So this is only a conceptual statement. I understand that completely. But just to give you some sense of how this aquarium, in real terms, not just dollar terms, supports the city's quality of life. The aquarium, as I say, supports more than 3,250 jobs in Virginia Beach once multiplier effects are fully considered. And with an operating budget of roughly $14 million, the aquarium supports more than $257 million in annual economic activity in Virginia Beach and more than $276 million statewide or Commonwealth-wide. And that is my report. I'll take whatever questions you might have. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you this afternoon.
And we can do,
Excuse me,
questions now?
Mr. Wood has a question.
Do you have more to do?
We have just 2 more quick items, and then we could take questions if that's
Okay.
acceptable.
Okay.
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 All right.
Thank you.
So, for those of you who haven't visited the aquarium recently, we have a 30-second quick video that shares a day in the life at the aquarium. So talk about transformation. I hope that I have transformed your ideas about the Virginia Aquarium today. As I mentioned, we're in growth mode, so we have 2 major projects, the Darden Marine Animal Conservation Center and the Owls Creek Marsh Pavilion. And yes, we are also planning for some really big projects. And these projects are going to be critical as we transform the Virginia Aquarium from a regional aquarium into a world-class aquarium. And I think that's what we all want to do. So I'd like to end today with my favorite quote from Walt Disney. Walt Disney always liked to say, all of your dreams can come true if you just have the courage to pursue them. And the way to get started is to just go and start doing them. And so when I see you again in April for my budget presentation, I hope that you remember that we have a really important mission at the Virginia Aquarium, but we're also a great, sound economic investment that's going to pay you huge dividends. And so I thank you for your support and your time today, and I believe our president, Lee Ensminger, has an invitation for each of you.
Thank you all for your time and your attention. I would like to extend to each of you the opportunity to come to the aquarium and have a behind-the-scenes tour for you and your family, and let us give you an idea of what this wonderful staff does, what we're doing for the community, and what our plans for the future are.
And I think I'll hold the quiz until you actually take the tour, if that's okay with each of you. So we'll take questions,
Okay,
and
Mr. Wood.
Anirban can help me.
So I'm assuming you've got him under contract for the budget, to make your budget presentation?
His contract is actually over with this presentation today, but we have the press release that went out at 2 o'clock today. So that press release will be included in my budget presentation to Mr. Hansen on January 14th.
So a couple of things jumped out at me about this. The off-season visits, which are pretty impressive, but also the impact to the state, separate from the city, the revenues the Commonwealth realizes. So I was trying to follow along, and I didn't really delve into what you had there, but it appeared that you had 26 million roughly in to the state on one of the slides, but then it looked like there was 9 million that was perhaps to taxes. So can you educate me a little bit on that? So the 9 million is there, but so that's tax, but go back a couple of slides. Right there. So that one appears to be, am I looking at, no, that's not it. There was another one. That one. So right there. So that appears to me in employee compensation, business sales, total of about 26 million to the state. Is that what I'm looking at?
No, I wouldn't add those numbers up, and I thank you for the question. So these are three separate categories. Business sales are literally that. Sales made by commercial enterprises or quasi-commercial enterprises in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That would not occur but for the operations and the visitation to the aquarium. So business sales, think about just local business sales, people who are proprietors of businesses, their sales go up by $19.8 million in the balance of the Commonwealth. This is not Virginia Beach. Balance of the Commonwealth because of what the aquarium does. The bulk of what the aquarium does, the impact is here. The hotels are here. The retailers are here. The aquarium itself, of course, is here. By definition, any spending at the aquarium, including in the form of ticket sales, is in the city of Virginia Beach. That's at $257 million. Employee compensation is just that. It relates to the jobs that are supported by the aquarium, directly and indirectly. What we're saying is that this aquarium supports 3,261 jobs once multiplier effects are considered. Now, as it turns out, if you do the math, if you take business sales divided by jobs, that Virginia Beach number, it's $78,000 of business sales per job. That doesn't mean these jobs people are getting $78,000 per job. That's not what it is. But a business, based on our model, that's able to benefit from let's say, another $78,000, that business, because the aquarium is here attracting visitors, will end up supporting one additional job on average. That's what that says. And then those 3,261,000 jobs are associated with about $80 million in employee compensation per annum, and that employee compensation includes, by the way, the value of benefits. So it's the health benefits, that's wages, salaries, so on and so forth, bonuses, but it's compensation in total. That's how, so in other words, that employee compensation, those business sales numbers should not be added.
Okay, but so that is, if I can, Mr. Mayor. So then, if you go to the next slide. No, keep going. Okay, so this, to the tax. So that 9 million is directly to the state, and that's but for tax money, the 9 million.
That's exactly right. That is but for tax money. So these are additive.
Okay.
So the Virginia Beach taxes are separate, disparate from the Commonwealth of Virginia taxes.
Got it.
So if you wanted to look at aggregate fiscal impact, the number would be 16.7 million roughly if you add those two numbers together.
Well, and see, that's a good point. So Mr. Jones just said the state gets more than we do. And I wonder if, and I don't know, this question for Mr. Hanson, are we making sure every year at the General Assembly that they are aware of the fiscal impact of the aquarium to the overall state revenue? Because $9 million is nothing to sneeze at.
That is correct. But we also are in partnership with the state, and we have very favorable considerations by Delegate Knight and Senator DeSteph, whose districts this is in, and we collaborate with the Army National Guard, and our future projects all entail solidifying that relationship for a long-term parking structure that will remove the parking on the west side of General Booth and allow us to move into the next big millennial of the aquarium's development. And so we have strong relationships, and they fully understand, and I'll tell you, our relationships are as good as they ever were.
I just hope that we make sure that we kind of gently remind them of the fiscal impact there.
Yes, sir.
Not sure it'll be gentle,
And I would happily help.
Anybody else have a question? Thank you for a most informative and delightful report. Thank you.
Mayor. Thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for your report. Lee, good to see you. Thanks for the board being here. Appreciate it. Just want to acknowledge Council Lady Wilson joining us. Glad to see you're up and about and looking well. Yes, ma'am. So our third briefing today is a short one. It's Andy Friedman, our Director of Housing and Neighborhood Preservation. It's opportunity to acquire federal funding linked to our Housing Resource Center. So we're just going to do a quick brief to bring you up. You had it in your Friday packet. Andy.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. The reason we're here is to help provide another funding source to the Housing Resource Center. We've put together multiple funding sources, while primarily city funds. There's, including what I'm going to talk about today, there's nearly $1 million in outside funding coming to support the activities at the center. We want to cement this source, and some action by both you and the Development Authority is needed. That's about $250,000 a year that we can generate, and what we want to do is see if you're comfortable with moving forward with an action item on February 5th, and if so, we'll have that prepared for your vote at that time. So you have to know how the Housing Resource Center operates to understand what we're doing. We manage the center, except for the Department of Human Services offices. We perform some functions there, but major functions are contracted out to nonprofits and one for-profit organization, which is ABM Incorporated. They manage all the non-homeless service activities there. And then we have the organizations that many of you know, Samaritan House, Judeo-Christian Outreach, and others, manage the actual shelters in the building. One of those is Virginia Supportive Housing, who we've partnered with for over 10 years, and they're managing the efficiency apartments in the building. Those are long-term housing, and residents there have leases. We want to attach federal housing choice vouchers to those apartments, and the value of that attachment of 24 vouchers would be about $250,000 a year. We have guidance from HUD on how to do that, and their guidance is basically we can't pay ourselves because we're the voucher administrators. We have to pay another entity. The most likely candidate for that entity is the Development Authority. We administer those vouchers. We can assign them to specific buildings. We've done that in many places. And because we own this building, we have to do this special arrangement. So HUD has said you have to have another entity own the building. When we've looked at it with the guidance of the manager and the city attorney, Virginia Beach Development Authority is the most likely candidate. They already own the Department of Social Services for a similar purpose, this Department of Social Services building on Virginia Beach Boulevard. We would have no effect on operations. We would just have an operating agreement with the Development Authority regarding all the operations and funding. We did brief the Development Authority on this back in September, and we'd like to go brief them again depending on your direction here today. And as I said, if you are okay with this plan, we'll bring an actual ordinance to take the steps necessary to achieve this goal on February 5th. And once the ordinance is passed, the city attorney's office would guide us on the steps necessary to make this happen. And then as soon as that did, we could start utilizing the vouchers. So we're just here to ask for your questions and concerns and give us your guidance on whether we should move forward with preparing an ordinance for your consideration.
I think it's wonderful we've reached out and found other ways to be able to help more people.
Does anybody object to us not going forward?
Thank you very much, Mayor, members of council. Thank you,
Thank
Andy.
you very much.
You saved me some time. I do appreciate it. All right, so, council members, we have Public Works. We have CJ Bodnar, who is now going to be head of our Stormwater Center of Excellence. And the Public Works Department is going to be presenting their update on their stormwater modeling. And unless somebody opens the door back there for him, okay. So you're coming in the back door. CJ?
Yes, sir.
You have no more than about 20, 25 minutes.
Well, then it's a good thing that I practiced this to be 20
Yes,
minutes.
yes, sir.
I gotta get the present. Terry, you gotta get the presentation up real quick.
You want some help?
He came in earlier to work on it, so he's,
Don't press any buttons. Whatever you do. There's planning. Good.
Hi, Andy. Good, thanks. How are you?
Go ahead, CJ.
I was gonna say hello to Mr. Mayor, but he's stepped out. Good afternoon, members of council. My name's CJ Bodnar. I'm in the Public Works Stormwater Engineering Center. With me today, I've got Mark Johnson, who's the Director of Public Works, Phil Pullen, who's the City Engineer, Mike Mundy, who is in the Flood Control Division, and Tarek and Sue, who work with me in the Technical Services part. Got a real quick agenda for you all. We're going to go through some background information regarding the study, some stormwater modeling and calibration discussion, show you some visualization results of what we can do with the studies, and then go on and talk about what the next steps are for the Stormwater Master Plan. Back in 2014, Moody's, which is one of the bond rating agencies, sent out a questionnaire to the city asking what we're doing regarding sea level rise and flooding. As part of that, council at that time authorized 2 CIP projects, one for sea level rise and comprehensive recurrent flooding, which you will receive a presentation on next week. And then the second one is the comprehensive master plan update, which is what I'm working on to discuss with you all today. So one of the things we want to just show you is in regards to flooding is this is the Ocean Park area. The Lesnar Bridge sits right here. The medium blue color that you see in here is what FEMA defines as the 100-year floodplain in the Ocean Park area. But what we have found is when you add in the stormwater conveyance system and what the restrictions that system does, and we run that through the model, that is the actual area that will flood on a 100-year storm event instead of what FEMA says will flood. So updating this model, updating the models, which were last done in 1990.
So would you show the two again? I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am. So that medium blue right there is the FEMA 100-year floodplain. That's what FEMA defines will flood on a 100-year storm event. That is the actual stormwater system that exists in the Ocean Park area. So when we run the 100-year storm using the storm pipe system, that is what actually floods according to the models. And I will talk a little bit later about validating and calibrating the models as to how we go about doing that to make sure our models are showing correct results. So the last time the models were updated was back in 1990. They didn't include any subdivision pipes. They basically included the main infrastructure, the ditches, the culverts, the canals, and the major culverts. The reason we're updating it is we know what we have better as in a way of an inventory at this point in time. We're creating the computer models to be able to model what actually happens during a storm event. That allows us to assess the performance of the system. Once you know what the system's doing for both flood control and later on we will actually be able to do stormwater quality modeling with these models. But once you identify where those deficiencies are, then you can inform the CIP of what needs to be done in order to improve the system. And ultimately, we're going to create a comprehensive stormwater management plan for the city of Virginia Beach with DEQ. Modeling is going to be done in all 31 basins. All 31 basins are shown there on the right. The models, with the exception of the lower southern rivers, and I'm calling the lower southern rivers, this is basically Indian River Road. This area down here is the lower southern rivers. Everything except the lower southern rivers we're doing in PC Swim. PC Swim is considered the gold standard. It uses EPA Swim as its engine. EPA Swim is a free program that you can download from the federal government. So for consultants, for developers, it doesn't require them to have to go buy an expensive piece of software. In the lower southern rivers, we're actually using the Mike suite of models, which is a suite of a different model program, which allows us to be able to throw wind impacts in. So we can actually go in and put a 20-mile-per-hour wind blowing from the south into the model, which I'll show you here in a little bit, and see what the effects of just having the wind blow in Back Bay for 2 days. So the models include the primary system. You can see up there what's we are defining as the primary stormwater system. We're doing the models for the 1, 2, 10, 25, 50, 100, and 500-year storm events based off the current standards and using a recurrent tailwater that allows us to make sure that we'll be able to overcome what's in the rivers when we do the modeling. The models are also being prepared so that we're doing all of those models, all of those storms with 1.5 feet of sea level rise and with 3 feet of sea level rise. And the great part about the models is once we adopt new standards, somewhere here later on this year, hopefully, we will be able to update the models to reflect those new standards. This is just probably more than what you all will ever want to know regarding modeling. This is actually a clip out of the model for Windsor Woods and Basin 4. This is actually Thalia Creek. This part of Thalia Creek is not covered in green because it's not included actually in the model. We have a USGS tide gauge right here that gives us the elevations. So we know what the elevations in the creek are during a storm event because we can actually measure that off of that gauge. But what you have is subbasins, which are outlined in the green. The subbasin is the area that collects water and drains to a certain point, which is a storage node. Those storage nodes also model what actual storage there is within that subbasin. So you're actually able, when water ponds up on people's property or in the right-of-way, we're able to see what happens.
Is this, I'm sorry, is this digital monitoring?
Which, the model? The model is the program that we're...
I'm saying when we look at capacity.
When we look at capacity, we're looking at capacity from a standpoint of what's actually built in the field. So it will actually model based off the parameters of the pipe, and it will also take into account the infiltration that occurs within that subbasin.
But we're not getting a real-time reading.
We can, and I'm going to get to that here in a couple minutes about real-time readings.
Yeah, they calibrate to real.
What's in yellow are conduits. Those are pipes. Those are actually taken straight out of our GIS. When we don't have information, we're sending survey crews to actually survey all of those pipes. In the last 3 years, we have surveyed about 20,000 storm drain structures within the city of Virginia Beach. Junction nodes are additional structures that where water is not loaded to. It is manholes, curb inlets, drop inlets, things of those nature. We also model what's called an overland flow, and I'm going to point out this one right here. What that does is when the water gets high enough within a subcatchment, it actually can flow down the street to the next basin. So it allows you to be able to simulate what happens when the water rises in this basin to the point that it gets over the high point and actually can flow down to the creek. We're modeling the irregular conduits, the channels, the canals, the ditches. Those are modeled based off of LiDAR, so we have the data. We know what the cross sections are based off of the LiDAR. And of course, you have to have the outfall locations as to where you're going, and we apply to that outfall location a boundary condition, which is at a minimum we're using is the king tide elevation of 2.7 as established by VIMS. So none of our models are we using an elevation lower than 2.7 for the boundary condition. Just to give you a comparison of the previous models from 1990 and the current models, back in 1990, there were a total in this model of 46 nodes and 58 conduits. The model that we have built for Basin 4 right now has almost 3,200 nodes and almost 14,000 conduits that we're modeling as part of the model. So we're getting a whole lot more detail. We're going to be a whole lot more accurate with what we're able to depict with what we're doing with the modeling. Wanted to just show you one other capability that we have in PC Swim. In flat areas like Windsor Woods, we can actually apply a 2D grid, which will allow the water to run across the surface. So if the water at this location gets higher than the water here, the water comes this way. But if the water's here is higher than here, the water can go that way. So it allows you to be able to simulate in a flat area like Windsor Woods or Princess Anne Plaza or Ocean Park what actually happens with the water and where it actually moves to. Now, one of the things we like to talk about is models. Every engineer can build a model. It's not a very complicated thing to build, but you have to make sure that the input and output data that you're getting out of the model is correct. And so we go through a process for validation. We have as I discussed earlier, the USGS gauges, so we know what the boundary condition is during a known storm, such as Matthew. We have rain gauges spread throughout the city, so we're actually able to see how much rain fell every 5 minutes, and we're able to input that into the model, which will tell us what the results are, but you still need to validate it. So we turn to our citizens and we ask them to help us, and they provided us pictures to be able to calibrate to. So for example, in this picture, which is out of Windsor Woods, we had the survey crew go out and shoot the bottom of the mailbox. We know what time the picture was taken. We know what date the picture was taken. So we know what the elevation of the water was at that point, and we can look in the model and see, did our model match up with what was seen in the field? You've got the corner of the person's stoop off the front yard in Windsor Woods. We can count down the number of bricks on the veneer on the front of the building and shoot the elevation right there where the water's located at. Or we can go and shoot the landscape bed right there by the red truck. So once we have those elevations, we run the model, we can compare the data, and what we're finding with the models is that we're pretty accurate with what we're doing in the model to depict the results. As you can see, no difference in delta between what was modeled and what was shot in the field of more than 0.3 of a foot. That's within 4 inches. The average difference is minus a half an inch. That's the minus difference in the model. So we're fairly confident that the models are actually depicting what occurs during the storm events. So the question then becomes, what can we do with this information? One of the things we're able to do is we have created an ArcGIS online map, and Tarek is going to switch over to that top one right there. And what this is actually a map that we're going to be able to input into the city's GIS so people can actually go in and see approximately how much water will be occurring in different locations during different storm events. This is everything that's in the ArcGIS online map at this time. So what we can do is ask, since we were looking at Windsor Woods earlier, I'm going to go back to Windsor Woods. We'll click on the next tab. This is what happens during a 10-year storm event in Windsor Woods. A 10-year storm event, just so everyone knows, it's not a storm that happens once every 10 years. It's a storm that has a 10% chance of occurring every year. So the colors, it shows you over here on the left what the depths are. So if you see blue, it's 0 to 0.5 feet depth of water, all the way up to red at 2 feet with the color ramp going up. This is the Presidential Canal, Rosemont Road, Presidential Boulevard. So if we click on the next one, we can show you what happens during a 100-year storm event. And you can start seeing how much more water floods in Windsor Woods during a 100-year event. On top of that, we can then throw in, clicking on to the next one, 1.5 feet of sea level rise, and see what happens when the sea level rises 1.5 feet higher. You can see how much more red starts showing up in the picture. And then finally, we can also show you what happens when there's 3 feet of sea level rise. And we're able to prepare these to be able to let people have an idea of what occurs. It also gives us a way to determine what needs to be repaired. What can we do to fix this problem? And that's one of the things that Mike Mundy and his group is working on right now with Windsor Woods. Another question that came up is, what else can we do with the programs? And we're going to go show you a couple videos here. So in PC Swim, when we have a 2D grid in PC Swim, we can only do this where there's a 2D grid. We can't do it everywhere. But we're going to go on and go ahead and click on over to the video for Windsor Woods. Hit the window button. There you go. Now, just to get you all oriented again, this is Rosemont Road. This is Presidential Boulevard. This is the Presidential Ditch. This is Windsor Oaks Elementary School.
Does sound familiar.
Presidential Canal, sorry. So if Terry hits play on it, you'll see, as the lighter blues would be less flooding, darker blues would be more flooding. When you see purples and reds, you start getting more flooding above a dark blue. So about 7 o'clock, you can see the water start coming out into the Presidential Boulevard. And then we can see how it expands based off the fact the system doesn't have capacity. And I'm going to ask Terry to pause it right there. And that's the maximum extent of the flooding, because we'll see once he starts playing the video again, you'll see that the water starts coming back in and receding. But when you look at these areas right in here, with the houses completely surrounded, we would be thinking don't have verification of this, but we do have it for this area, but we don't have it for other areas. We would believe that the house might be flooded during a 100-year storm event. So I'm going to let Terry finish playing out the videos. We ran the video, as you can tell the time. We ran it for a 2-day period just to be able to see what happens. And you can see as the rain starts receding and stops falling, you see that the flooding starts decreasing as we go through the model.
Is this based on capacity of the
storm system?
Of the storm system.
And we're modeling all of the storm system as if it was a clean system, where our operations division goes out, cleans the pipes. So we're making the assumption in the models that all of the pipes are completely clean.
Does this take into the account the ditches as well?
Yes, sir. It counts any ditches, or all ditches are modeled in the model. The only thing not modeled right now is anything smaller than a 24-inch pipe.
Is that
Yes, ma'am.
South Plaza?
No, ma'am, South Plaza would be up here.
Turned around, okay.
Yes, ma'am, this is Windsor Oaks. This is Old Forge, I believe it is.
I
This is
gotcha.
Gladstone Arch. So
Know that one well.
we're gonna.
This is where you and I have stood several times in this
I
cul-de-sac right there.
remember it all too well, Dave.
Yes, ma'am, you do, and I do too.
Minimize that one. Now, one of the other things is as I said, yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I don't.
That's
I didn't mean
fine.
to interrupt. As far as that model that we just saw, is that showing all the work that's been done up to date, or is that?
That's showing everything we've done to this point at Windsor Woods. We have gone ahead and updated the model to include the dredging that has been completed. And that dredging is showing some benefit to the system, but it's not solving the problem at this point in time.
So my other question, and we don't have, not all of the areas are in PC Swim yet.
I'm gonna get to that here in a minute as to
Sorry.
what's done and what's not done.
Yes,
Jumping
you
the
keep
gun.
doing that.
Sorry.
As we said, now in the lower southern rivers, we're doing the Mike modeling. Mike is done completely with the 2D. So I'm gonna get Tarek to switch over to the video. I had to load up to YouTube to get it to run. Because for some reason it didn't want to load. So we're gonna click on that tab way over on the far left and we're gonna hit play. Pause it for 1 second, please, Tarek. This is Princess Anne Road. This is Sandbridge Road. This is Back Bay. Indian River Road would run right about through here, and Muddy Creek Road would run right down up through here. Now, just to give you all an idea, there are portions on Muddy Creek Road that the elevation of the center line of the road is elevation 1. So as you can see, go ahead and hit play there, Tarek. As you can see, what we've done in the model is we've simulated a 20-mile-per-hour wind blowing from the south. So the water is being pushed up into the bay by the wind. And you can see how the water up in the upper ends has to get to a higher elevation in order to be able to flow downstream. So you'll see up here, the water's filling in the black gut, and then we start seeing this come down, and then we'll see some darker colors start to show up in the upper reaches of the back bay. And eventually, and I'm going to ask Terry to go ahead and move us forward to about 120. I'm going to click somewhere right out in here, Terry, on the line there. Go ahead and play. I click the line right about there. Keep going down.
Click the line.
You're going to click on the line right there, Terry.
Advance it.
Yeah, now hit play again. And you can see up here in Asheville Bridge Creek, the water levels are rising. This is about an elevation of 1.6 or 2 within the creek at that point. Terry, if you go ahead and switch back over to the presentation, because I've got about 5 minutes left. So where are we at this point in time? Modeling effort began in May of 2015. As of December 31st of this year, we have models complete for 22 of the 31 basins. The basins you see in green, we do not have models for at this point in time. The basins you see with this dark blue color have been validated at this point in time. The light blue color have not been, the model is complete, but it hasn't been validated because we lack information. We don't have enough pictures in that area to be able to say, here's a picture, to be able to tell the survey crew to go get us an elevation so we can confirm the model's operating correctly. So we have a completed model, but we don't have a validation yet. People can send emails with pictures to stormpics@vbgov.com. We would appreciate all pictures that anybody may have of flooding that's occurring. Our goal is by September of this year to have all the models 100% complete, validated, calibrated, including having the Southern Rivers validated at this point in time. You have a question, Ms. Kane?
Oh, I was just, the one you don't have validation for, the light blue. What is that?
That is what drains to the Atlantic Ocean. That's Rudy. This is Little Creek. This is what drains to Lake Taylor. And then this is the part that's done in the Mike model that I haven't been able to find validation information for.
So are those, are the models complete?
Yes, ma'am. We have completed
All of
models. They are all completed. We just are looking for validation areas to make sure that we have the model validated 100%. We want to make sure the model's right before we tell someone, here's what the elevation's going to be.
Now, you described the other one as being the gold standard. This means that that's not gold standard?
No, actually, the Mike model, the reason we're using that is because it allows you to be able to apply the wind. You can't do that with PC Swim at this point in time. We're working on that.
It's less accurate?
No, ma'am. We actually, when we first put this model together, we had 17 million elements in the model. Unfortunately, the model wouldn't run. So we had to go back in and combine some drainage areas, combine some of the mesh and redo it, and we ended up with about 2.5 million. This model takes about 26 hours to run. So we set it up, let it run overnight, and come back the next day and have an answer. So where are we going from here? Next week, as I said before, next week you're going to receive a presentation on sea level rise. We are working on completing the modeling for all of the basins. We have hired Kimley Horn to do the master plans based on the results of the model, and they're going to look at that master plan not just on what floods right now, but what floods in the future for sea level rise. Because the idea is to prioritize projects for making repairs so that when we have flooding in the city, we can go out and know what to repair and what to fix. We're going to do, of course, the sea level rise scenarios, because it hasn't risen 3 feet at this point in time. They would not receive a high priority ranking compared to, say, a Hollis Road over off of Shore Drive, where we need something done immediately because it floods right now. And upon completion of that, we're going to go to DEQ and work out a stormwater a DEQ is going to let us do a comprehensive stormwater management plan for the city of Virginia Beach, which will cover all stormwater regulations in the city. The reason we want to do that is right now the state regulations applies the same rules wherever you're at in the city, wherever you're at in the state. If you're out in Blacksburg, you have to design to the same regulations that we have to design to here. Well, they got a little bit of an advantage in Blacksburg. They got a little bit of elevation to be able to work with. So some of those equations that they use don't really apply very well to the coastal areas. So that's why we're going to look to do a master stormwater comprehensive plan. And I'm available for any questions you have. Again, I'd like to remind people, if you have pictures, please send it to stormpics@vbgov.com.
Any questions or comments? Yes.
As far as the ArcGIS map, is that live now?
No, ma'am. We're trying to finish up the last couple of those ones that are shown in blue to get those in there. We actually have CDM Smith, who's working with us on the models, hosting that right now. I can share the link with you all so you all can go in and take a look at it if you want to. Ultimately, we're going to get those layers from CDM Smith and we're going to put it on the city's GIS.
As far as the areas in green, those are ones that haven't even gotten to the validation process.
No, ma'am, they're not to the validation. What we're doing right now is building the models. We're filling in data gaps. For example, the Elizabeth River, CDM looked at the GIS system. We had about 1,600 structures or areas that we didn't have information in. The pipes are shown as size 0 or there's no storm pipe shown. So we're going through right now and trying to fill those data gaps in to make sure we have an accurate representation of what's out there before we build the model.
And I think the slide said in fall of 2019.
By September of 2019, we're intending to have all the models complete.
And then as far as I'm glad I didn't cut in again because I was going to ask about prioritization of projects. Is the plan to be that we can punch in this simulation that we want and it can tell us, yes, this is a high priority project, so there's not a human opinion involved, or is it going to ultimately still be an analysis of an engineer, or is it going to be the computer software telling us, no, this is the most important project because of X, Y, and Z?
We're actually working on the criteria for prioritizing the projects right now. One of the things we, at our group, is anything that's a life safety issue is automatically going to be a higher priority than somebody's street floods when Hurricane Matthew comes.
Well, and that's really kind of what I'm getting at, because you've got such an emotional element into this, but there is the dollar amount and what assets exist there, but then there is the life issue as well. So that's why I'm wondering, so the system will be able to give us that objective
Yes, ma'am.
response.
We're going to do it similar to what you'll see next week regarding rankings for sea level rise, as to if there's a life safety issue, that's going to get more points awarded to it than somebody's street floods. 3 people are affected by the flooding on this one street.
I just have one other comment. The ArcGIS map, I'm very happy that that's going to be public. I think that'll do a big service to the community, and I'm just really pleased that that's the direction that went. So
Yes,
thank you.
ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Henley, did you have a question?
Well, he wants to say.
Well, what I would let is the DPW talk about bang for the buck and project selection. And what this model's gonna show you is that freeing up size of pipes and investing, because we're not gonna create enough revenue streams to go in and redo entire drainage systems and tear up all those streets. First of all, the impact to the citizenry, but more importantly, the costs associated. So
Yes,
let Mark address how we're gonna go prioritize and select and get in there and spend $1 and get the biggest return on investment associated with that.
Yeah, we always first look at structure flooding and see what we can do to relieve that. And what you're going to see us looking for when we look at the models is we're going to first look at our major trunk line systems and see if they're undersized. And those are the systems that'll give you the biggest bang for the buck. In other words, it'll help relieve flooding in the largest areas of these watersheds. So we'll probably look at that, and we'll probably also look at low-hanging fruit in these areas, so we can at least make some improvement. It's similar to what we are doing over in Windsor Woods, where we call the big 3 systems that we're designing now with the FEMA money. So we're going to look at all these watersheds and see where we can find those types of projects and systematically improve those areas over time, because this is going to be a long-term effort to really bring all these watersheds up to a standard that will meet the sea level rise that we're going to see in the future.
Okay. Ms. Henley?
But now, when you talk about the stormwater plan, master plan, is going to be completed by January 2022. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to wait that long before we're going to start knowing which kinds of projects we need to do.
No, ma'am. As soon as we get models validated, we hired Kimley Horn. They're going to assist us with taking a look at the drainage areas. The model is the tool that we use to look at those watersheds to identify underperforming portions of the drainage system, and it'll help us identify what improvements are needed to bring flood relief into those watersheds.
Well, I'm probably going to get into an area that maybe is not the right thing to get in now, but if I don't say it now, it's not going to get said, because we're going to be running out of time. In the southern areas, I think we're looking at a lot of concern from people who I've been talking about wind tides for 30 years, but now people finally understand what it is. But, and it's become quite an issue because I think of climate change, and I was going to ask, what about these 100-year storms whenever they get redefined, but that's another question for another day. But what we're looking at, and people are very much concerned about, is, well, what do we do about these development questions? that are we being faced with at this time in these areas where you're showing it's going to flood? And I wanted to ask about this letter that DEQ sent to the mayor in December, and what kind of response we're making to this. This has to do with the applicant, Home Fed Asheville Park, requesting permits to impact approximately 3.75 acres of surface waters, including wetlands, to move forward and develop Village E. And when I read that, I got pretty daggone upset, because with all we went through last year, I think all we heard about was developing Village C. And there just wasn't any talk about imminently developing Village E. And I sent a question, but I don't think I got a response. Does this change what the city is going to have to do? I mean, if this development continues, you know, we talked about, and we're doing phase 1, but we said phase 2 was going to be a long time in the future, and maybe not. But is this going to cause more pressure for that additional development? And I mean, when we know good and well what's going to happen, are we going to be able to use this data to address things like this? And how are we going to respond to this question?
Well, Ms. Ennis, that's a two-part question. One, yes, we will be
Probably
able
6 or
to,
7
we
months.
we will be able to use
I
the
just didn't have
models.
time to go through all of it. Okay.
We will be able to use the models, but I want to make it clear, we've told Home Fed all along, they cannot develop Village E until all of the improvements to Asheville Park are completed. At this point in time, all of the improvements to Asheville Park have not been funded, and we can't do anything beyond what we're doing now. They cannot develop Village E without coming back to you for approval.
So are we going to respond to this permit? I guess it said if they apply for a permit. Is that the way you read it, Mr. Mayor? The letter was to you.
Yeah, I got it, yeah. Yes, we're reviewing that letter, and we're going to provide comment back to DEQ.
Because there's just a lot of concern in the area of people who say, okay, we're flooding, and you're going to keep building in places that you know are going to flood. Now, are we really, we're, somehow or other, we've got to be able to address the long term.
Home Fed has quite a few hurdles to get to developing Village E.
Mayor,
Okay,
Ms.
yeah.
Henley, 2 years ago, when we got into the headlock of Asheville Park, we recognized that we cannot come to you, the city council, and ask you to approve developments that are gonna flood. And the only way we decided that we could give you that guidance and provide you reassurances from a complete department of professional engineers, both in Public Works and in Planning's DSC, is to invest millions of dollars in modeling. We are now 2 years downrange with this. We have a center of excellence. You just saw synthesized to the simplest of discussion points, the effectiveness of what that modeling investment is going to do to you, and it's going to be the basis by which we make recommendations to you going forward in a calibrated form that substantiates that the model and what we're telling you is approvable, is as substantiated as we can possibly do. We hear your fear. We are sensitive to that fear, but we are not approving and we are not making recommendations for you to approve developments that will flood in that 10 and that 100-year scenario. All bets are off after that because, quite frankly, there's not enough tea in China for us to be able, or money in the bank, that we can build beyond those required containment beyond those standards.
Well, I had to swallow really, really hard to vote to approve that Village C going forward. But, you know, I kind of thought we were all in good faith, and when I see that this came along within a couple of months, I wasn't very happy. And I don't appreciate that. If anybody on staff had any idea that Village E
I can
was
tell
going
you,
along.
we have not instituted this. This is if you want a permit E, what are you gonna do about it? And Mark will respond appropriately.
We were
In
not-
conformity to where the council currently stands with regards to asphalt.
David?
I just had a question for CJ.
Yes, sir.
Is soil retention, is that reflected in any of your models? It's obviously another way that we can combat it. Is soil retention,
Yes, sir. We're actually are modeling the BMPs that are out there, the major lakes, the major ponds that are in the subdivisions. Those are being included in the model.
and will you be able to have recommendations then on ways that we can improve the soil itself?
That's something we hadn't even thought about at this point in time, about improving the soils in order to do that, to be able to absorb more water.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
exactly.
I have not, but
SDG plans.
I'm going to write that down and we're going to look at
Talk.
that.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Great.
But I will tell you, we're taking a look at things like Bow Creek, and we're talking about doing away with the golf course and turning it into pure BMPs and walk paths and various amenities. But I can tell you right now that creating capacity on the east side of Rosemont Forest that supports the plaza drainage area is going to require the elimination of the Bow Creek golf course. And we're going to turn it into a chain of lakes that's going to create the capacity necessary. And we are looking at, all things are on the table. So soil conditioning, current use of land, and creating the capacity and the holding and the movement of that water, all of that is reflected in what they can do with this model.
Shannon?
Can we, going forward, when we get development applications or proposals in front of us, can we get a picture of this 5, 10, 25 with the overlays attached to those applications?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
that when we're making these decisions going forward, we have those pictures there?
Yes, ma'am.
Please.
Because, matter of fact, I can show you, that is Windsor Woods during Hurricane Matthew. So we were able to put that together fairly quickly.
And I'm really kind of, because a lot of times we'll get them that'll be on the 1700 block of ABC Street. So, I mean, can we get down that?
I can get, yes, ma'am, I can get down to an individual intersection, show you what's going on.
So when we come to you and say, we want to put a gate right here that prevents Windsor Woods being impacted by backflow from the western branch, and we put a pump station right here, and we draw down all this water system here, they're going to show you the impacts of investing $100 million to support that neighborhood and the associated drainage area. And this is going to take a new level for all of you, a new level of fidelity that's going to say what your investment is going to do and what the impacts are to preserve our neighborhoods in the inner portion of our city.
Louis?
One of the things, just going through my mind and watching it, particularly when you threw the picture of Ocean Park up there and the different levels of flooding and so forth. How are you going to use the modeling and this information to be helpful in the decision-making process for future development in areas like that?
We are actually doing some of that in the southern rivers right now. The comprehensive plan for the city recommends a preliminary stormwater analysis be done for any development that requires council action in the southern rivers. So we're already looking at that in the southern rivers area when projects come in and reviewing the model and seeing what will actually happen when they develop the project.
What about the other parts of it?
We can do it wherever we have a model at, we can do that. We just, right now, there's no standard for us to be able to apply it elsewhere other than the southern rivers.
So, but in answer to your question, Mr. Jones, when you infill develop, meaning you come into a parcel that's contained in the Ocean Park neighborhood, because it's all built out as it is now, there are some remnants associated with the Pleasure House Point acquisition. You'll be able to know what the elevation is you need to be to meet that 1.5 and that 3 foot, and what that impervious footprint on impervious footprint post-development on a pervious section of that. But there's very little in that whole Ocean Park that isn't already infilled. And so it's going to be incumbent upon us through Public Works and the Stormwater Revitalization Program to go in there and right-size pipes and to create the capacity. And regional BMPs will come into play, and the costs associated with acquiring land that is inherent to flooding, those that we see in Windsor Woods, et cetera. And so we'll incorporate city investment in stormwater infrastructure as we go look at acquiring properties, and those that won't be put back, and that BMPs will be created, and those that will be acquired, and we'll partner with developers to bring new houses and new construction to bear that's above that floodplain in a modernized form.
Okay.
I just happen to know that there's a proposed development out there, and based on that picture that you showed us right now, there's not much room for development from the flooding standpoint, so.
But remember, having stood out there, if you go to that Ocean Park diagram, I've stood out there in hip boots, in the middle of a storm, with the operations engineer, the now newly promoted operations engineer, and we have watched fish come up through the inlets and land in the middle of the street, and we know that we are going to have to block those pipes, and we're going to have to prevent those backflow devices. We're going to have to install backflow devices to prevent that there. We have to increase pump size so that we can take precipitation that's falling into the bowl, and we're going to berm, pond, and pump. So you're just seeing what we currently have modeled, and open pipes that back up when you have high tide into the streets of Ocean Park. And we've been there on that ground together, and we know what we got to do to prevent that.
You say berm, pond, and pump, you're talking about Chesapeake. You're not applying that necessarily to the southern rivers at this point, are you? I mean, this pumping thing is really, really, really an issue because of the difference in the Albemarle and the Chesapeake.
Well, I will tell you, my opinion is, Ms. Henley, that berming, that ponding, and that pumping is going to be critical to the success of the southern watershed.
I don't know, but you're going to have to really explain that pumping concept. It's not working.
Well, I understand, but you're talking about being able to levee portions of that southern watershed,
Well, the difference-
grab that which is on one side and cast it to the other side.
But the difference, of course, is that up in the Chesapeake, that water goes right on out through the Chesapeake Bay channel into the ocean. Whereas down in the southern part, it just sits there and then comes back up on the land until it can get all the way down to Oregon Inlet. And the fact that there's no outlet is the major difference. And folks are asking for an explanation of how we're going to deal with that.
And,
It's a big
and
one.
so tune in next Tuesday, because we're coming at you with your first briefing with regards to the Dewberry study. And that one's a work in progress, but we're coming at you. I mean, we're teeing you up for a very long spring with regards to stormwater
So
conversation.
that's why I've asked for a pre-meeting with some of the leaders in the southern watershed, just on what steps have been taken and kind of the process, not the data until you all get it first. But we've got an awful lot of folks who are pretty concerned, and it's a lot of difference between these two watersheds. I just don't, I think we're really going to have to start talking about them as being the differences in order for people to understand.
We recognize the difference.
Well, I know you do, but I don't necessarily, I mean, I understand the differences, but I don't understand using the same system when they are so different.
Okay. All right, thank you all very much. Next, Mr. Hanson.
So you, members of council, we have reserved the 11th and 12th of February as a two-day goal-setting workshop and a visioning process. You've had some discussion amongst yourselves. Our current facilitator for our goal setting and visioning process, Mr. Lal Sumat, we do not have a contract with him in place. We do have an opportunity to acquire the services of another firm, Mr. John Martin's SIR, on the Charlottesville contract. We think that it's important for you to contemplate how you, as a new sitting body, want to proceed. I would like to share with you a template that we received from Mr. John Martin on how you might proceed as a new council. I'm prepared to respond to your inquiries as to what kind of a process we have used for the new council members in the past. But I think that with 3 new council members here and with a council member now serving in the mayor in a different role, I think there's an opportunity for you all to take that 2 days in February in the first quarter of 2019 to undertake a process of team building, of conversation about what the roles of city government as a council member might be, that you have an opportunity to learn about the winning the traits that winning cities, succeeding cities, competing cities of like size here in the United States are doing, and to have an opportunity to share your visions, your individual goal initiatives, and priorities with your fellow council members, and that we have an opportunity to engage in a long-term process on a quarterly basis. We see the first quarter of 2019 being a 2-day seminar, a 2-day workshop, a 2-day session where you get to know each other, following some interviews that the consultant would have with you to ask you what are your priorities and what are your governance issues that you would like to have discussed here as a governing body. And then we would follow that up in the second quarter of 19 to deliver you visions, statement. We would share with you additional information. You'd have an opportunity to continue to interact with the consultant, and then you would have a discussion on the key drivers that are affecting cities and decisions that cities are making. We'd follow that up with another workshop at your mid fiscal year, which would be third quarter of 19. We'd have an opportunity to review performance on key priorities that you provided to the consultant and provide you a strategic vision plan. We think that reaching out to 2040 is really difficult to grasp, but we think that if you can wrap your arms around a 10-year strategic vision, you can accomplish that, because you're going to have to be in the throes of execution pretty quick to deliver something in a 10-year. I can tell you that what you just got briefed is being contemplated by the staff of a $500 million stormwater program that's got to be executed in 15 years. And depending on how you look at that and what cost sharing you get and assistance from the state, you're talking about an additional $34 million in financing of your stormwater program. And my job is to provide you a way to accomplish that. But when you start looking at a 2030, I'm certainly, when you get interviewed, about every one of you is probably going to have stormwater in your top 3 priorities or your top 5 priorities. And so we got to deliver solution sets. And then, of course, our comprehensive plan. We believe that our comprehensive plan, which is a land use document, has got to be greater than that. It's got to incorporate your strategic vision. It's got to incorporate land use, as we always have, but it's also got to talk about your entire strategic vision and way to go. So what I am going to pass around now is a request for you to fill out individually as a council member to address whether or not going into that goal setting workshop, that visioning process, what you would like to do. I will look at Ms. Henley and say, I know she conducts in a monthly forum. She knows the pulse of her district. I don't think she's going to want me to do a roundtable exercise, but to some of you others, I'll offer that to you. And resources need to be mobilized. We're prepared to support you as district council members. If you prefer not to do that, having come off the campaign trail and feel like you're pretty adept at what your district's functioning as, then I understand that. And so I would turn it over to the mayor at this point to tell me how you want to proceed. As I said, I can't tell you Lyle's availability. I know that he's dealing with some medical issues right now, and I've talked to a couple of you about that. I do not have a contract with him and would require him to provide me a proposal to submit that to you. And I'm happy to discuss with you what those fee structures are over the next week or two, if that's.
Ready? Ms. Henley?
I would just say that this 2040 thing was not related to our retreats. That was a very separate thing that was done as a 2040 plan. That didn't come out of our retreats. So that needs to just be cut off there because that was never a part of it. But I do think that, the way it was developed and what it says at this point maybe is not germane. And we even have a commission, the 2040 commission, that's been going around the city talking about that. And so I really think, that may need to be totally revisited, but that wasn't a part of our retreat. That didn't come out of retreats.
Rosemary?
I'm sorry that Lyle's not doing well, and I guess I've heard John Martin speak before, and he's really good. I mean, he's quite a great speaker. I mean, of course, never done a retreat with him. But our results will still come out with, we'll set our goals of what we want to accomplish, short term, mid-term, and longer term. We're still going to come out with those things and prioritize.
It won't be as intense a racking and stacking that you went through over the last. You'll spend the first day getting to know each other and doing some visioning. You'll spend your second day summarizing that in the morning, but by mid-morning, you'll be into a discussion of your interview priorities. He'll have taken your priorities and kind of told you and provided you feedback with regards to where you have commonality in the majority of the council, that these are your priorities. He'll engage you in discussion, but more importantly, he'll just facilitate a discussion amongst yourselves. I will have the staff fully there to answer any questions regarding how we're proceeding or how we might proceed, and then we will take our guidance from you as we move into a budget cycle.
So, and Barbara's right, 2040,
It had nothing to do with our
and
retreats.
I still don't understand
No, I
it.
think that needs to kind of be revisited and
Yeah.
set aside.
I concur with that.
But also, I really liked, and I think whenever we did it, the council liked it, when we had the round workshop format prior to the retreat. So we got to hear from a lot of different people, and we could travel around the room and listen to folks amongst themselves talking about, if they had $1 to spend, how they would spend it, and the different things that we utilized. And hearing that before we went to the retreat was really, really helpful. And for the new folks, each of us as council members invited so many people to help fill up the room. But I don't know if that's what you want to do again, but I found it helpful, and other people I know, hearing about it in the past, said so as well.
What that form that you have, Ms. Wilson, is really tell me whether or not you want to have one, Mr. Nygaard, at the beach, and if you do, what dates are appropriate for you, what format you want. We'll facilitate tables. We would certainly, it'll be open to anybody to attend. At-large candidates, probably to your advantage, to attend various districts. We have 7 districts. Ms. Wooten's already told me she wants to hold one, and you just have to tell me the format. If you like that workshop, we'll facilitate it. We'll put 15 tables out there, 10 people at a table, and they can provide you, we'll orchestrate a series of questions related to each one of you as council members. What questions do you want to ask your constituents to do that? And then you can piggyback. I know that maybe you don't want to hold one in a certain district, but you want to attend one somebody else's district just to get a flavor for what's going on.
I really liked when we did the one big one, we did it all in one night. That was my preference.
I can do that. Absolutely.
That's why we're discussing.
Right.
Definitely.
We think it'd be helpful if we all went to each other's districts and just not show face, but listen before we go out to the retreat. I think that will go a long way. We have a new staff, new council. We all campaign in all these different districts, and now we're talking about just having it one night. I think we owe it to the public to go in each other's districts because we're all on the same team. And listen, let whoever represents that district, David and the Beach whatsoever, David and the Beach as well, be the main, moderator, and welcome each of us, and we listen to them. That way, when we go out to the retreat, we understand where everyone is coming from each district. I think that would be a strong start.
Good. Shannon, who's?
We can finish this vein of conversation before I go down to my question, if there's anything else that people want to add to this.
Okay, Barbara.
I was just thinking, I just feel like we need the retreat sooner rather than later. If we're going to wait for everybody to have all of these things, we're never going to have this retreat. I think we really need to. After all, we spent 6 months going around the city listening to people, and if we didn't hear anything by then, we didn't listen very good. I think we need to get this council organized and working. And I just am concerned that we put it off too long if we're going to do something like that. Are we thinking that we would keep this February 11th and 12th dates?
Yes, ma'am. I have told the staff we are going to roll out the door. We're going to respond to, we can put one big one together for what Rosemary's wanting to do. We can do individual ones, like Aaron is talking about doing. We can respond to each of you as district council members, and we can get it all done before the 11th of February. I'm here to serve you. My staff is here to serve you. You are brand new. I agree with you, Barbara Henley, that we need to get going, and we need this council to come together. I believe Mr. Dyer has been beating me pretty hard over the last 2 weeks about getting this council to gel and facilitating and executing your will. So I'm here to please.
Jim?
Well, and I think, I appreciate what Aaron said and also what Barbara said on this. And I think it's critically important that we do have a retreat as soon as possible. So keeping the schedule, I think, is extremely important, as is getting the feedback from the citizens. I would also agree with Barbara. This is kind of unprecedented that we've actually had 8 people around this table. We're on the campaign trail, which normally at most is 6 people. So everybody has certainly gotten a flavor for what people think, but I think certainly we reach out to do it. But I think what's critical and probably critical for the newer folks to understand is this is our way to give direction to our 5 appointees that we have, because there's only 5 people that the council hires and fires, and they've got 11 bosses, and it's not fair to them, and it's not productive for us if there is not direction going to them from the council, so as a body, and that's why I think it's maybe not to the point where we've done before with the million check off of, circle your top 16 or whatever it was and that thing, but going to saying these are the priorities that the council generally wants, and then kind of focusing in on the higher ones. So I think that it's critical that we move forward and keep this on track, and then schedule these meetings, and to the extent that we can schedule effective meetings and attend, that we do so, but we certainly need to keep moving forward, I think.
And I think
Yes.
for me, what's helpful, as we're talking where we are going, where are we? What we're doing, is it working? The resources that we're spending, are we gaining progress with that? So that's interesting for me to know. Is it working? And if so, how so? And if it is working, how is it working? And should we continue on that path?
No,
that's
I agree with
interesting.
you, because sometimes one of the biggest pitfalls of any organization is organizational stagnation. A good organization always reinvents itself, takes a critical look at itself, has those critical discussions among each other, find areas of, unanimity and things going forward. So, that's why these discussions really can be healthy for all of us. Anybody else? Yes.
I just wanted to say I'm fine with changing the format of our retreat, as I didn't like checking numbers and yelling out numbers either. However, I agree with, I think Jim said it. I want to make sure there's direction given to staff at the end of the day, so that we have a true strategic planning retreat that ends with a map, a measurable accountability plan, that you guys know what we expect of you, and that you have your direction to go forward with, as opposed to us just talking for the sake of talking. So I would like to make sure that we have that. And I enjoyed Mr. Martin's presentation to us a couple of years ago and his research on the millennials, and I've enjoyed his work and his presentation with the Convention and Visitors Bureau. So he does know our market somewhat. I just want to make sure that we have a document at the end of this exercise that, so when you go off, whatever it is, that you're going to be doing, that you're doing it at our direction, as opposed to wondering what you're supposed to do and having to ask our permission every other week. So I think just as long as we have that, we're going to be in good shape.
Thank you.
Okay. Yep, Jess.
Just to piggyback on Shannon, I think that's excellent. I think, though, John, he's not here, so I'll bring it up. He had mentioned us having a formal vote after the retreat, saying this is what we put together and this is what we decided as a body. I think that would be beneficial in just solidifying the record. So that was John's idea, but since he's not here, I thought I'd bring it up at the table. And I hope you guys were on the email that I sent out to the body, but I really do think this year the retreat needs to be recorded live and streamed live. Last year when I was getting feedback from the last retreat, people wanted to know where they could go, that we were in economic development, there wasn't a lot of extra seating for the public, and frankly, most people can't break their workday to go and see it, and I know that that would be helpful to a lot of people who have a lot of interest. And then the other thing, it sounds like the body wants to go into the direction of doing the interview system like we did last year. I would really love to have some kind of a summary prior to the retreat to give me an idea of what we're going to be talking about, and the perspectives of you guys and myself, so that if I have independent research that I'd like to do, I can come prepared to have a meaningful discussion. That's been kind of my biggest complaint the last two retreats I sat through, was there were ideas and things talked about that I felt like if I had had more information, or had a better ability to prepare, I would have had more productive conversation with all of you. And just being the previous most recent new kid on the block, I think that the other council members that have not gone through the retreat yet might also feel that that's meaningful as well. So I would like, if we're going to do the interview process, that we have some kind of summary before the retreat, so that we have an idea of what we're going to be talking about.
Okay.
Check.
Okay.
And that would be helpful, I think.
Okay, just to put a wrap on this, we have an amazing opportunity right here. We are a new council with a new chemistry, and with that comes challenges and opportunity. And I think what's going to be helpful, and I think one of the things that I took away from the recent election, and I'm sure other people didn't, that, the public would like to see us do things a little differently, a little bit more effectively, with more interaction, with more inclusion, and, them part of the decision process. I think moving forward, and, Rosemary's right, a number of years when we did those facilitated get-togethers, they were amazingly productive in terms of what was going on. But once again, we got to respect the individuality of each council member and what they feel comfortable with in terms of engaging with the public. But by preemptively bringing the public to the table and because the one thing I found out that when I did my Meet the Mayor tour, and I was able to cover pretty much every district, within 10 days, I think, they want to be heard. They want people that have listening skills, because the people that I found out, everybody's got something different. The people that lived at the oceanfront were different than the folks that lived in Pungo. Pungo was different than, the Kempsville, Centerville. We have a very unique city in terms of we've got so many different types of districts that with people having different priorities. And the idea of listening and doing that overall strategy map to find out what the priorities are in every district, and I think that was Aaron was alluding to, that we understand where those priorities are. We put a price tag on it, and we find out you have to execute strategy. That's the whole thing. we just can't talk about it. We have to have executable plans going forward. And so I think by having the preemptive meetings, but then once again, we're new. We have a chemistry. We have to gel. We have to come together. Now, we're not always going to agree on everything. That's not the way government is. But if we are unified in vision going forward, that we're here operating at the will of the people for the needs of the people, and then, we're going to have our differences, but, always be respectful and always go forward and engage in meaningful dialogue. I think that's going to be the way to go. Yes, Ira.
I was just saying, I think it's important, through my professional experience, it's one of the things you talk about building a championship team, and we are a championship team. One of the things that's important is that we actually get to know each other.
Precisely.
But the thing that makes us strong is our districts. That's who we work for. We work for the people. So while I'm all for getting to a retreat by February 11th, if that's what we're doing, as long as we come away with goals in mind and a vision and a certain direction of where we are going, but we all, and I challenge every council member here, that we all show up at civic leagues. We can all pick a date together where we all need to go back, because it's not enough just campaign. You make your campaign pledges and promises to these things, but it's important that we go back to these civic leagues in these communities and actually hear our constituents. That will make a huge difference in the way we go forward, where we talk about budgeting and developments and running the city. But it makes a difference to the people that we ask for their vote. Now we go back and we show them that we earned their vote, but we listen to them. And that's how we build this transparency, we build the trust in our city, and we build this cohesiveness that we all want Virginia Beach to be. And that's, I guess, to Ms. Councilman Henley, what I was referring to.
And I think the important thing, and we do have to wrap up to get into executive, going into the budget cycle, I think we're going to go in well-armed with, information going forward, and maybe a better sense of the priorities, what they are in the city. And, civic engagement is successful every time it's tried. Thank you all very much. Okay. We're going to be ready, council liaison reports? Anybody? Council comments? Jess?
I have two items. One I have asked be placed on the next voting meeting. I guess that's the January 15th. It's an ordinance adopting a revised speaker policy in terms of the open mic, that it be televised and streamed live on Facebook. If anybody's interested in adding their name to this, I would love for you to do so. Anybody who'd like feedback, want to give me feedback beforehand, David, you want to pass that your way? Basically, it would just mean that our meeting wouldn't conclude before open mic. It would just continue to run through open mic. And I know that the mayor and I had conversation that when we talk back to people who come to speak to us during open mic, that might be, I guess, stepping in sticky water in terms of that being a public meeting and it not being a part of our formal meeting could cause issue. I'll let the city attorney elaborate on that if that's necessary, but I just think that since we're here and we don't have to turn the televisions off, we shouldn't, so that is there for your advance copy. The other one is in regards to, as you know, the legislative packet, I mentioned that I would like to see us do a referendum on district voting. So this is just simply a draft, so I'm just starting the process and putting this out there. Anything in here is open to change or questions. It's not scheduled to go out on any agenda as of right now, but it's just the start of the process. So, but this is in regards to putting it up on the referendum on the 2020 election cycle.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yes.
Ms. Henley?
And I'm sorry to take so much time. I have a whole list of things for the retreat. That's why I think it's so important, because we really don't get a chance to bring things up at these council meetings. But we have we've got a lot of really extremely important things on next week's agenda. But two planning items are very important, short-term rentals, and we also have the Piney Grove issue, both dealing with conditions. And we've had a lot of talk in these short-term rental things about not wanting to be doing anything that we can't enforce. And I think the thing that we're looking at with the particularly the Piney Grove thing, has really led me to understand that we routinely impose conditions that are not enforced. And how are we going to do a better job? Because I think when we adopt anything, any zoning or conditional use permit, and we've got conditions imposed on it, I go away thinking that those are going to be in place when this development is done. And I'm finding out that that's not the case. And we've got this simple one that we're looking at. It's a routine thing that we put on anytime there's a parking lot next to a residential, that the lighting is going to be shielded, directed away from the residences, and it's not going to spill over. And I'm finding out that that doesn't mean what I always thought it meant. I thought it meant it wasn't going to be directed into anybody's windows. But now I'm told, no, that's not what it means. It's whether some candlelight or other is at a certain level. I would like to have in our packet on Friday a report as to how we enforce conditions. And I think when we're adopting the short-term rental thing, we don't want to put conditions that are not going to be enforced, or we're looking at this other thing. I want to know how we do it. I was always under the impression that these conditions were a part of the building plan and would be a part of the construction. But to find out that here we are a year after something's been constructed, and we're still trying to enforce the condition, that's told me an awful lot.
Yeah,
I don't
Ms.
like.
Henley, with due respect, we have one item that we have to get to in executive.
I know, and that's why, I was real concerned that we were running out of time. But since these are on the agenda next week, I would just really like to have something in writing Friday to look at when we are considering these issues next week.
On enforcement, Ms. Henley, correct? Yep, I got you.
Okay, Mr. Wood, can we go through our extensive agenda review?
I believe we have a speaker on our sole item, so.
Okay. Okay, at this point, the chair will.
Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to introduce your new treasurer, Lee Henderson. I'm not sure that the council has met her. Lee has been the deputy for John Atkinson, and by code, she's appointed into the position. I've known Lee through the whole RACS project. Met her when I first showed up here in 2006. She's a strong supporter of the staff, and she's doing an outstanding job, and I just thought you ought to be able to welcome her into her new position. So,
Thank you.
if you would, please.
I appreciate that, thank you. Like he said, I've been here for 18 years. I've done a whole lot of things in the treasurer's office, been around for a while. I'm honored to serve in this position for the next 11 months or so. If anyone has any questions of me, my door is open. Please feel free to stop by downstairs and come speak to me about any issues that you may have. Like I said, I'm honored to be here and to serve the citizens.
And thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee. Thanks for coming up. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this point, the chair will entertain a motion to recess into a closed session pursuant to the exemptions of open meetings allowed by Section 2.2-3711A Code of Virginia as amended for the following purposes: publicly held property, discussions or considerations of the acquisition of real property for public purpose or of disposition of publicly held property, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiation strategy of the public body pursuant to Section 2.2-37A3, Princess Anne District, personnel matters, discussions or consideration or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of the public body pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1, council appointments, council boards, commissions, committees, authorities, agencies, or appointees. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Go around the table.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Ms. Henley?
Aye.
Mr. Moss is absent. Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Rouse?
Aye.
Mr. Nygaard?
Aye.
Ms. Wooten?
Aye.
Ms. Kane?
Aye.
Ms. Wilson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood?
Aye.
Mayor Dyer?
Aye.
Mrs.